Good evening, everyone. I welcome you to tonight's January 3rd Planning Commission meeting. At this time, we will call this meeting to order. Could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Kellum,
Here.
Mr. Wagner,
Here.
Mr. Greenwood,
Here.
Chairman Sluter.
Here. We do have an amended agenda tonight. Has everyone had a chance to review tonight's agenda? Any discussion? Okay. I'll take a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to provide the amended agenda.
We do have a motion. It's been properly seconded.
Yeah.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Kellum.
Aye.
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Chairman Sluter.
Aye. Next on the agenda is, being that is the first meeting of the year for the Planning Commission, we do have an organizational procedures to go through, the first being election of a new commission chairman. At this time, I will solicit any motions for new chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion for Mr. Greenwood for chair.
All right, Mr. Kellum has made a motion for Mr. Greenwood for chair. Is there a second? All right, Mr. Wagner seconds. We have a properly seconded motion. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Mr. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Kellum,
Aye.
Chairman Sluter.
Aye. Pursuant to our bylaws, we do switch right now, recall.
Before we vote. Aye, sir.
Yeah, you are now chair.
Ugh. Moving forward with the agenda, we have the second thing on the agenda. We have the election of the commission vice chairman. Do I have any motions on the floor?
I would make a motion for Mr. Sluter to be vice chair.
I'll second that. Oh, can we second? Yeah, we can second the chair. The motion's been made and properly seconded to elect Mr. Sluter as vice chair. Are there any objections, any discussion? Can we get a roll
Mr.
call vote?
Wagner,
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Wagner,
I think she's done already.
Excuse me.
Mr. Wagner,
Hey.
Mr. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Kellum,
Aye.
Mr. Sluter.
The next item on the agenda is the election or appointment of our commission secretary.
I'd like to nominate Ms. Barbara Trimmer for the commission secretary.
I'll second that.
Motion made and properly seconded for Ms. Trimmer to be the commission secretary. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, get a roll call.
Mr. Kellum.
Aye.
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Chairman Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Sluter.
Aye.
Next item we have on the agenda is the adoption of the commission bylaws for the calendar year. I just wanted to throw in something here. We're going through a major redo of our bylaws for the Board of Supervisors, and our board clerk is looking at all that. And I was wondering if we could maybe table this until the next meeting, or even have it at our work session to discuss some changes to the bylaws. If we don't, we can always do as is. Just want to see how everybody else felt on that. Or do we want to go over the way it is now, or? Is it right? Anybody?
I'm okay with tabling this and discussing it at our work session and moving to approve at our next meeting.
I would second that.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and do you think we want to do it at our next meeting or at the next work session that we're having coming up anyway?
I would like to discuss at our next work session.
Work session, okay, that's properly seconded. Any discussion? Can we have a roll call?
Mr. Pelham,
Aye.
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Chairman Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Sluter.
Aye.
Next item we have on the agenda is approval and adoption of the 2022 Planning Commission Annual Report. Has everyone had time to peruse that and give their opinion?
I have read that over and I think it's well done. I think it covers what both we and the planning staff have done. I think it's a very good report. I would make move to approve it as written.
Seconded.
Motion made and properly seconded to approve the adoption. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, can we get a roll call?
Mr. Pelham,
Aye.
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Mr. Sluter.
Aye.
Chairman Greenwood.
Aye. Last item for that section, we have the approval of the 2023 meeting dates. So everyone had a chance to look at those. I hadn't really checked. I haven't seen the new calendar for the holidays, but I'm sure that they've worked it out so it doesn't fall on all those. Anybody have any changes that they need to make to that, or is it as good as is?
I'll make a motion to approve the 2023 meeting dates.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, can we get a vote?
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Pelham,
Aye.
Mr. Sluter.
Aye.
Chairman Greenwood.
Aye. Meeting dates have been approved for this year. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, we have the review and approval of the minutes for the amended November the 1st, 2022 regular meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look over those minutes?
Very well done on those, by the way. Thank you, staff.
Making a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the November 1st, 2022 regular meeting minutes.
Okay. Second. Motion properly seconded to approve the amended November the 1st regular meeting minutes. Can we get a roll call?
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Mr. Pelham,
Aye.
Mr. Sluter.
Aye.
Chairman Greenwood.
And thank you. Very well done. The next item we have on the agenda is the December 6th, 2022 regular meeting minutes. Any discussion on that?
I move to approve the December 6th regular meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made and properly seconded to approve the December 6th regular meeting minutes. Any discussion? Seeing none, can we get a roll call?
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Mr. Pelham.
Aye.
Mr. Sluter.
Aye.
Chairman Greenwood.
Aye. That night is passed. Number 6 on the agenda, we have public comment period. Speakers have one opportunity of 3 minutes per individual or 5 minutes per group on non-public hearing matters. And tonight we do have a public hearing for CUP 03-22. The Simon's property down there on Route 360 and changes to Chapter 86 Article XIX floods and ZO2-22 MHF Properties LLC. So if it's anything other than those, you can speak. I'll open public comment period. Please state your name and the district or your address when you come up, please. Okay, one. Oh, I think she's for the public hearing. Do we have anybody online for
No,
public
sir.
comment?
Nobody signed up.
I think you were going to stand up. You were going to talk at one of the other issues. Okay. Seeing no one for public comment, we'll close public comment. Next thing we have on the agenda is the first public hearing. First public hearing is CUP-03-22. The owner applicant John W. Foley. Applicant John W. Foley, second trustee owner. And this was tabled from the December 6th, 2022 meeting. So do we have a presentation?
We did it at the last meeting.
Okay.
I can just briefly run through it if you like.
That would be good to refresh our memories. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have an application for Mr. Foley. The address is 5149 Wakima Road, for a short-term rental. at the last meeting, we presented everything. He had several, neighbors that came and spoken, with concerns. Mr. Foley did send a letter, I believe y'all have copies of it tonight, that he has talked with, his neighbors and they've come to an agreement. The neighbors are here, so they may also want to speak, on this to kind of enlighten us a little bit. We did, send Mr. Foley a letter. He was advertising his rental. And Mr. Foley did take his, rental, off the, Airbnb and the, BBRO site, so it is no longer being advertised.
Have any questions before we start the public hearing?
No.
Seeing none. Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. In that case, we will go ahead and start the first public hearing. Anyone that wishes to speak, opportunity of 3 minutes per individual, 5 minutes per group, this particular issue only, and please state your name and your address. And we do have. Which one is this one for Sherry? The ones that are this, is that for the other one?
That is, for the larger development.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Hi.
Hi, I'm Laura Bondurant. I live at 5255 Waukema Road. I've been a resident there for over 29 years. I've been a resident in West Point and King William for over 40 years. I want to say that we did meet with the Foleys, that they listened to us and to our concerns, and they have worked on certain areas of our concerns, and for that we are grateful. I'm not quite sure that everything is going to work out right. And so if you all decide to move forward with this and allowing them to have this short-term rental, then and take it to the Board of Supervisors, then that puts us in the position of monitoring. So if you put us in the position of monitoring, we're going to need to know what the real guidelines are. By that, you've done a little bit of work by saying no more than 6 adults. Well, we've already been told that when there was notice on one of the Vrbo sites that they had 12 adults, we were told that actually 3 or so were teenagers. So how are we going to know what is an adult? Secondly, noise. As we all know, the main concerns with Vrbos and short-term rentals is safety, noise pollution, pollution in general, additional vehicle traffic in our areas. What are you going to do about noise? Is there a noise threshold? What do I have to do when there's too much noise? Do I call the police? Do I call the owners? I need to know. When we were having our daughter's wedding in a rural community at a destination, we could not bring in a band because there was a noise ordinance, and that noise ordinance did not allow for bands. We could only do DJs. That was fine. We also had to shut down before 11 o'clock because that was part of the county's ordinance. I would like you all as a planning commission to put more guidelines. I've read the notes. I've read that the Foleys are following everything now, but it really concerns me. What if the Foleys decide to move or sell their property to, say, other entities that want to capitalize more? I need to know as a neighbor what my rights are. There is a subdivision ordinance that says that you all have a duty to maintain public safety, health, comfort, prosperity, and the general welfare of the public. I need to make sure that all of those things are going to happen because you all are going to get tax revenue. The Foleys are going to get money. I'm not going to get anything except to have to borrow binoculars to watch what's going on. This is a residential area. It's a quiet area. Verbo even says that if you have a house in a quiet area, to make sure that you have guests that understand that it's a quiet area. We have a very close neighborhood. Recently, I texted several of our neighbors to see if they would support the Mattaponi Food Bank. Verbo people have no investment in this community. Yes, they may bring in a little bit of tax revenue, but I, as a 40-year resident, have put far more money into this county. I get my groceries here. I get my animals' food at Tractor Supply. I get my haircut here. I put a lot of money into this county. I am all for growth. I understand that this is a tricky area in a rural environment. I'm all for rural tourism, but I want to make sure that it's planned. Why don't you have B&Bs? Why aren't you getting hotels? I understand monetizing the river. I understand monetizing these barns and things for weddings. I just hope that you have a plan in place, a plan where neighbors like me can live peacefully in a quiet neighborhood. And for that, I thank you for your consideration.
Good evening. My name is Sybil Rose. I own 4985 Wakima Road, where I lived for 22 years in this county. I own the 3 acres beside the Foley's property, and I also own 450 acres across the road from their property. I spoke at the last meeting about this, and since then I've met with the Foleys. It's commendable that they're going through this permit process. However, I still have a lot of the same concerns as the Bondurants sharing the property line. As I said in the last meeting, I have ongoing problems with residents. With 450 acres, I have a lot of adjoining properties. I have cameras and trail cameras to monitor people that are constantly trespassing during hunting season. When I spoke with the Foleys, they told me that they have rules, and I understand that, but the no dog thing, I don't know how that's going to be enforced. I have free range chickens next door. I had a fence up. I have had multiple dog attacks with the former neighbor's dog. And it only takes about 5 minutes for a dog to wipe out a whole flock. In a perfect world, these rules sound great, but we don't live in a perfect world, and there's constantly people throwing litter, throwing trash all over my property. They told me last year they had 30 rentals. If they only had 6 people, that's 180 total strangers that are next door in a year. In a decision-making process, when I go through decisions like this, I look at pros and cons. For me, as a next door neighbor, there's absolutely 0 pros or benefits to this being approved. And it also gives me a high alert of more security issues and safety issues with total strangers. I'm sure a lot of them are fine, but it's just the minority of people that can really be disruptive. It's a very concern to me, a big concern about enforcement. Like I said, okay, there's 20 people over there. Who do I call? I've complained for 8 years about a kennel issue I have next door. Sometimes I call zoning, sometimes I call animal control, and the enforcement keeps shifting around to the point where it's taken almost 9 years now to do something about a zoning violation. So I find the fact that these short-term rentals, I still think can be very disruptive to the community. We all as a neighbors try to be on the alert. for strangers in the neighborhood, because we've had multiple break-ins in cars and things. And if you've got total strangers coming in every week, it's just, I find it very disruptive, but I think the bottom line for me is there's just no benefit. Not to me, at all, and I'm going to have to, if this is approved, it's just gonna put more of a burden on me to make sure that my property is safe and secure. I know the Foleys have the best intentions, but, we know that these things just don't always fall that way. So thank you very much for your time and consideration. And I hope the board will come up with some plans to make sure that, you know, these things can be enforced if they are approved. But I just don't understand how you could approve something that's just not going to benefit the neighbors or the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Lisa Mason, 392 Roanoke Trail. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I feel very strongly a sympathy towards the Bondurants and the other neighbors in that neighborhood. As you know, we live next door to a bed and breakfast, I should say. And we do have those people coming through our neighborhood. We have people in our driveway. We have people trespassing. We have way too much traffic on the road that comes into our neighborhood. And there has been problems with violations, and, you know, I spoke very, very strongly about when the ordinances were put in, that there be a means to enforce the violations. And I know it's a slow process, and I know you're in that process right now, but it just doesn't seem, as Sybil said, you know, there's no benefit to us. And it's our neighborhood, and we were there, you know, living our lives, and our lives have just been interrupted so much by the addition of a small business in our neighborhood, in our quiet neighborhood. And I'd just like you to consider that aspect of it already. We've seen the problem already in the county, and I don't want somebody else to have to go through what we've gone through. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Do you have anyone online? Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I think the Foleys want to speak.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, you can speak, yeah.
Happy New Year.
Maybe-
We're the Foleys. I'm John. This is my wife Ruby. She wasn't here last time. I promised I'd bring her. We're 5149 Wakima Road. So, really appreciate you letting us come back. And I don't know if everybody had a chance to review the pack that we sent with, our amendment. Yeah, yeah, great. Okay, so, I think, you know, a lot of what we're focusing on here are kind of, you know, extreme examples of things that could go wrong. You know, and we did, prior to knowing that, you know, we needed to get this permit, we were renting it last year, and we did rent it a bit more than 30 times. And we had one issue where, as we discussed last time, the woman had wandered off the property onto Mr. Bondurant's property. And then they have shared with us as well that there was some noise, and I think we've taken steps to mitigate both of those issues, hopefully to their satisfaction. And we've also agreed to put up a privacy fence between the two properties, not along the whole line, but to you know, help with noise and to you know, make it clear where the property line is and give some peace to their dogs. So, you know, I think we're doing all the right things to try and make this work. We go into this understanding that, you know, there is the opportunity for complaints to be made if there are issues, and you know, we're ready to run into any of those head on. I mean, I think we've prepared well. The thing that we promised, or I promised last time, is bring Ruby back to talk a little bit about the actual process of renting the house. And I know that was spelled out a little bit, but I'll let her talk briefly about that, if that's all right.
Sure. Thank you for having me. The vast majority of our rentals come through the booking platform Vrbo, which stands for Vacation Rental by Owner. And I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but after lots of research, I selected that platform for two reasons. It's typically known for attracting older guests, more families, I guess, higher quality guests who are looking to rent out a whole home for a family vacation. In other words, these aren't people who are looking to rent out anything like by the room, or they're not, workers or anything like that. They're really focused on family vacations. The second reason I like Vrbo is it really gives you the ability to control the listing more than some of the other websites. One example of that is you can choose whether or not to do what they call direct bookings. So with a direct booking, a potential guest can go online, see your calendar, see that there's an opening and book it, no interaction with the host. We have chosen not to allow for that. So if somebody, sees our home, is attracted to it, sees that the dates are available, they have to send me a message saying exactly who's coming, how many adults, how many children. I ask them to tell me the reason for their trip. I ask them to read through our rules and affirmatively, say that they will abide by them. We require them to purchase damage insurance on the home. And I will say that of all the rentals we had last year, every single one purchased damage insurance and we never had to use it. I feel like that sort of speaks to the caliber of guests that we got. I mean, these are really people who are treating the home well, as if it was their own. After that, after they've sent all of that information and they've also put in their payment details, I get back to them saying, wonderful, it sounds like a fit and we look forward to welcoming you to the home, or, maybe this isn't a great fit. We try and be quite choosy with the people that come into our home, which is, super valuable to us. After that, they typically book a month in advance. So maybe a month before their arrival, I will check back in with them, send them some more information about the home. I try to include lots of information about like local businesses and things that might be going on in the community, events, like little, the things that happen at the Town Point Park. And then a day or so before their arrival, I send them a check-in code. We do not exchange any keys with them. We set a code to the front door. It's a 6-digit code that it only functions for the duration of their stay. So it is activated on the day of their arrival and disactivated the day they leave. So that's how that goes. They check in, we check in with them, say, how does everything look? Does it, meet your expectations? And what they typically tell us is everything's great. We're so excited. We're happy to be here. We can't wait to explore the area. And, we'll let you know if there are any issues. And we typically don't hear of any.
And I think if you look at we pulled a couple of guest book reviews and things like that out, you'll see Ruby's name all over them. There's a lot of communication that happens both ahead of the visit and, during the visit. So, very, aware that security and these things are concerns. We put another camera in, inside of the Vrbo guidelines, but to make sure that we've got the entire front of the property covered, we know who's coming in. I hope that everybody sees that there's like open lines of communication and we're willing to do what we need to be good neighbors, continue to be good neighbors. So.
And then, I'd like to point out that the nightly rate is typically about $700 a night. You add on to that the taxes that the guests have to pay, the fees that they pay to Vrbo, the cleaning fee, which is $250. And, the minimum amount that they are paying for their stay is about $2,000. For a week in the summer, it can be $6,000 or more. And, I'm not saying this to say, hey, it's so great, it's so much money or anything. What I'm saying is that they are making an investment in their vacation. They're not there to, break rules and be disruptive because, with the Vrbo platform, if they do break rules, we terminate their reservation and they have to leave. They don't have, tenant rights or anything like that.
I think just the last thing that we want to add, and feel free to chime in, but I think there's an initiative in this county, around lodging, short-term rentals, and I think this aligns with that.
Yeah, we looked at the comprehensive plan in advance of this meeting, and we saw that one of the areas that the county wants to focus on is tourism. You know, there aren't any hotels currently, all there are short-term rentals, and there aren't very many of them. So we do feel that we are offering, you know, high-quality lodging to visitors to the county, a place for people to stay if they, you know, want to come visit West Point, or if they want to go to Colonial Williamsburg, and, you know, this is the best spot they can find close to there. We hope that we're filling that need. We really strongly encourage our guests to visit local businesses like every step of the way. It's included in the package of information we send them. It's included in our Vrbo listing. It's included in our guidebook. We, you know, have talked to these local businesses, and they've often said, yeah, we had a group come in for dinner and they said that they were staying at your house and that they loved it. And that they, you know, want to come back next year. So, you know, every time we hear that, it's great news for us, it's great news for them, and we feel that it's great news for the county. So when Ms. Rose, I understand, talking about, you know, what are the benefits to the county, to me, that is big.
Like I said, if you maybe just wait there, because if we don't have anybody else to speak, maybe you can answer some of the board's questions.
Certainly.
Be happy to-
Versus that. Anybody else have any, want to speak during public comment from the audience? Oh, we have, maybe just sit there.
My name is Elliot Plunderant, and I am the next door neighbor along with my wife. And I will say that my wife and I do appreciate meeting with the Foley's. They called us, invited us over to their house to discuss some of the issues. One of the things that was brought up tonight really hit home with me. Ms. Foley said that it is a big investment and important to them, this home. Well, our home is a big investment for us, and it's very important to us. And that neighborhood has been there. I think the first home that was built there was over, I know it was over 30 years, because my wife and I built our home there 29 years ago. And we were probably about the third or fourth house in that neighborhood. It's a neighborhood of about, I'm guessing now 13 or 14 homes, most of which are valued anywhere from $500,000 to more than $1 million. I know one of the homes sold downriver, and it was the asking price is 1.2. They didn't get that. The house sat on the market quite a while, and it was mentioned by Mr. Sutherland at the last meeting that that house was being rented out, and it was. We happened to stop at the dock thinking we were welcoming new neighbors. And they said, oh, no, we're renters. Nobody knew that. The county didn't know it. Mr. and Ms. Foley rented out this past summer. The county didn't know it. So that's what my wife is talking about. Who is going to enforce this? I know the Foley's are doing everything they can to try to make sure that things are safe and that their home is protected and their property is protected. But who's going to enforce this? I didn't catch the lady's name that came up here and spoke earlier, but she said the same thing. She's having issues with B&B in her neighborhood. So what are we going to have to do? I mean, I don't think they're going to do anything on purpose, but if the wrong person rents it, they live in Richmond. Who do I call? Because I'm not going to wait around. You know? So I'm asking you all to take that into consideration. It's been a neighborhood for 30 years. Neighbors, people that rely on each other, do things for each other. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Unruh. Is there anyone else in the audience? Didn't have anybody online, so. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And then move on to discussion from the board. I just have one thing, some of the questions I wrote down that were asked earlier, and like, so we'll go into a bunch of them if we need to. What was it? Oh, someone was saying, if the property gets sold, it automatically, the CUP gets canceled. it doesn't move on to the new owner. So that isn't not a problem with that particular thing. Like, I'm gonna put that out right from the beginning, but some of these other questions, some fellow planning commission members had questions at the last meeting, so I don't know if you have answered them or I'll let them ask, but some of the ones I'll just throw them out there and then you can answer any or you want, and they can add in. Like one of them was saying, who do they call? Can they call you if there's a problem? From the neighbors. And like I said, we mentioned the problem with boats, we mentioned the problem with dogs, we mentioned the problem about, and you said you were gonna put up a fence, but like I said, that some people can run around a fence, dogs can run around a fence. We said the boats, you're not supposed to have a license, but then we said, we saw something on your website, but you said you were fixed, that was allowed, and it was still on the website last time that, like you said, people can use your boat or a boat, not your boat, but anyway.
Yeah, I guess we can start. The boat is 100% off limits. And I think I mentioned this last time, but I had all new electricity put in at the dock this past year and put a panel up at the top of the hill that's locked and the power's off. So, you know, I mean, nobody has keys to my boat anyway. They couldn't lower the lift and do anything, you know, push it off, push their own on, something like that, you know. I also say, like, I can't control that there's a public ramp down the street, you know, so somebody drops in, but we did remove from the listing any mention of boating. So that was handled.
I can confirm that, Mr. Chair. When I had pulled it up prior to sending them the letter, there was no listing of a boat. It was just kayak.
Any of my fellow members have questions or more clarification?
I actually have three specific questions. One of them, the VRBO, is any additional insurance required other than homeowners insurance that would protect adjacent landowners and or guests, or is it just your typical homeowners insurance?
No, we have, so Verbo has insurance that protects us in the event that a guest damages something in our home. That is what we require them to purchase. And, you know, the main reason I brought that up was just to say we're required to buy it. It's available to us and we've never had to use it. And I said that more to speak to the quality of the guest. In addition to our homeowners insurance, we have short-term rental insurance that does protect the home against additional damage caused by guests. I assume that it would protect adjacent properties. I am not sure about that though. But if something were to happen, we understand that we would be on the hook for it.
The second question, since our last meeting, I researched this quite a bit. It seems that the norm, there's basically two scenarios where you have the owner on premises or an absentee owner.
Mhm.
And what I saw is that in most cases, when there was an absentee owner, that they had someone local acting as a leasing agent who would be that person close by to direct your phone calls to if someone had a complaint. I believe you guys are in Richmond, so you're an hour away or more.
Mhm.
So there's nothing official in place. I don't have any kind of contractual agreement, but and I'm really sorry the name escapes me. There's somebody just down the street from us, down the street being within 5 miles, who is he's retired Army, and him and his wife both have property management experience. And so he has started to help me out with just some projects, but has also made himself available to be that person for us in the event that, you know, something comes up and he can run over and help us with that. So now I'll say that, like, again, you know, we haven't had that issue in the past other than, you know, hot water heater went out one time, you know, but he wouldn't handle that and somebody else did. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll also say we are in Richmond, we are an hour away, but we do consider ourselves to be very hands-on. We're at the property all the time, checking in on little things, and we hire cleaners and landscapers, but it's our home, so we're there frequently. We're always doing work there. We make ourselves available to the guests around the clock, and we certainly would make ourselves available to neighbors in the event that there was an issue. And, you know, when we started, we thought about hiring like a true property management company to handle, you know, the day-to-day booking details and things like that. But to be honest, we felt that nobody cares about property more than us and that we would do a better job. And so far, I think we've done.
The third question is going to go more to staff here, but you spoke about the taxes that are generated to the county.
Mhm.
I don't believe we currently have a transient tax.
Yeah.
And a lot of the research I did, that was pretty typical. Anywhere from 15 to 18% transient tax. Now, that's just something I researched and found. That's not something the planning commission can vote on one way or the other.
Mhm.
But is that this whole VRBO, Airbnb, and we have several wedding venues here in the county. I see in the paperwork here, the Mattaponi Winery, the Kirby's with their seafood place in West Point. And a place for people to stay is a little bit of an issue.
Mhm.
But the county really hasn't been faced with it. This is kind of the first time up here. So I think we as a county, we're gonna have to probably dig into this a little deeper and talk about transient taxes. And even if we want to go into the property management, you know, having someone, you indicated anywhere from $2,000 to $6,000, you know, maybe someone could be incentivized to really be hands-on and be there to address the Bondurant's concerns, or, you know, whatever we do here kind of opens the door countywide. So we just have to be real careful how we go at this thing.
Sure.
And Ms. Graham, this is a conditional use permit, but I mean, basically, there's no limitations anywhere in the county. Anyone could basically come in and ask for a conditional use permit.
For the short term.
Yeah.
They would need to be in the AC district.
Okay, so it's outside of the comprehensive plan and stuff like that. Okay. That was my three
Yeah,
questions.
I don't know about the transient tax. I know that Verbo collects tax for the county on our behalf. And actually, the reason that I found out about the permit was that I called the treasurer's office to see how the tax was received by the county. And they said, well, we can't tell you, but by the way, you also need this permit. And that's how this all came about. But I know that Verbo collects taxes for King William County on our behalf. I don't think it's as much as you were saying. I don't know if it's called a transient tax, but it's something.
I briefly talked with the Commissioner of Revenue today, actually, and she said the county currently does not have a transient occupancy tax. There has been a Senate bill that was passed that requires beginning September 1 of this year or 2022, because it just changed, that it be computed upon the total charges that the property owner receives. This is something that she will be looking into, but we currently don't have it on that. So right now, they're going to be getting a business license, and that's going to be based on their gross receipts for the business.
So I guess as a business person, my question would be, if Verbo's been collecting the tax from you, where has it been sent to?
That was our question as well, and that's why I called the treasurer's office to see what they had received. And they said, well, before we even go down that road, take care of this permit thing, and then we'll talk again.
We have full records of
We
all
have
the
it
transactions.
from
You know,
Verbo.
we just, we don't. have
So
that.
the money's in limbo somewhere from the 30+ rentals
Mhm.
from last year.
We can tell you how much it is. It's
Yeah.
$787.
That's the transient, or that's the Verbo tax on the 30+ rentals was $700 and some dollars.
Yeah, so we can tell on the Verbo side, we weren't able to reconcile it on their.
Mr. Maggie?
Well, I'm glad we cleared that up. I think that helps. I think that's something we had questions about throughout the county with rentals, and we do need to clear that up. That doesn't affect them, except we just need to get the information. My question to Ms. Graham was, when they rent out a parcel, are you notified of that at that time?
Not each time it's rented out, no.
Should we be?
That could be a condition that if you want to put that in, but
I mean, we'd be happy to submit like a monthly statement that shows, you know, what was rented and how much, tax should be coming across, and
Okay, you provide that to the planning officer.
we don't now, but we have access to it, and we have, a complete dashboard of.
It'd be very easy to provide if it's helpful, but we also don't want to overly burden the office with our
It may be
reports.
something we need to work with Commissioner Revenue on. They are the ones that
I do
ultimately.
think we need to look into that because, from not only this, but many other places we've got in the county where we have similar situations. Well, that's all I have for right now.
I just have something quick, Mr. Chair, y'all mentioned. You'll have a very thorough screening process in place for guests that want to stay there. Do you have any examples of guests you've turned down before, payment?
We have not turned down very many people. We find that the folks who want to come and stay at the home who are attracted to that, peaceful rural setting and who can pay the nightly rate are generally the ones who come to us. We have turned down a lot of people who have asked to have events there. Hey, I want to have a wedding. It's going to be 30 people. Your house looks perfect. Would that be okay? We'll make it easy. And we just say no. Like, we're not in that business. We don't want to deal with events. So those are the ones we turn down. And we would turn down people who seem otherwise inappropriate, but we have not done.
One of the things that was mentioned earlier, is there a threshold at age between adults and kids?
Yeah, that's a good point. I would assume it's 18 years old. I will say, I know what they were describing earlier is that we've had generations of families who are grandparents, parents, and then, they'll say kids, and it turns out the kids are teenagers. So are they adults or not because they're 17 years old and have driver's licenses? I don't know. We're prepared to set whatever threshold you like. I would think that 18 is fair.
We do have it under our ordinance. The principal guest of a short-term business rental unit shall be at least 18 years of age.
But I think that's talking about the principal
Right,
guest who.
not the
books.
number of
And we
guests.
actually have ours set at 25. So, but typically, what we really mostly get for 3-generation families is almost always grandma who's booking for the kids and grandkids, or mom who's booking for her parents' kids.
Guess that's one of the things we brought up before. You said you set for 6 guests, but if we've been told that there have been more than 6 guests, you consider 6 guests the 6 over 25?
So, yeah, just to clear, we were renting it without any knowledge of this permit and those requirements. And so we did have it open and we've since changed it. And I mean, that should be easily confirmed.
So moving forward, and like we said at the last meeting, the rules for this permit is if you get 3 violations, you will lose it. So I just wanted to make you sure
We're well
this is
aware.
not.
Yep.
And that comes from the neighbor. So, we'll go back to my original question. Can they call you? Will you give them your personal number, or will you give them that person's number that you said that they can call anytime to maybe try to resolve something before it gets into a situation where it would have to be something?
100%. 100%.
Maybe that could be a
Yeah.
stipulation. Any other questions from the board?
Are there any time limits on the conditional use permit?
As long as they comply with all of the requirements, they get a business license annually, they don't have any violations.
Ownership, I guess.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that it does not transfer to future owners, because I wasn't aware of that. So when somebody brought it up, I was like, that is a fair point, but.
That makes sense too, because we wouldn't want it to be going on in perpetuity for anybody. And that,
Yeah.
right, right. And again, well, thank you for answering the questions. And I guess we need to discuss amongst ourselves.
Well,
Oh,
if I may,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, the Foley's have gone to the greatest extent to resolve all the issues. They've met with the neighbors. They have every right to rent their property under this ordinance. I think, again, they've done everything they can. I don't see any rational reason that we can reject this. Yeah, a couple of things that I would suggest. One thing, be sure we have in our conditions that they may bring kayaks and canoes to enjoy the river, but not our boats.
Okay.
And the other thing, the conditions or the information provided by the Foley's recently, does that need to be a condition or we just take that?
What was that now?
The letters that you just got and the information that Foley provided. Does that need to be a part of the conditions or is that just an agreement between him and his property owner and his members?
We'll have that in the application and the file.
And one other thing they did bring up, they mentioned something about noise ordinance too. And we do have a noise ordinance and that's with the sheriff. So that would be, I guess the neighbors would call the sheriff, I guess. Like I said, we're a complaint driven department, the planning committee, every department, because we're just so small. So I guess they would call the sheriff. And I guess, Sherry, do we have to list the height or the decibel level of noise? And we do have
don't know off
cutoffs.
the top of my
Okay,
head.
but anyway, there is one, so you can find it at 11 PM. I think we said you can't have any noise after that at all.
One thing I would be sure of is that we have current information on how to get hold of them. And we forward that to the sheriff. Because a lot of times something is gonna happen, it's gonna be after our hours. And that way the sheriff has a way to get a hold of the property owners.
What are y'all's rules and regs on pets?
We don't allow pets. If
So
there
the
are ever
issue
dogs
is
on the
that-
property, it's our personal dogs. And we went back and forth on the pet issue and the reason we decided against it was because of our neighbors, because we know that they have 2 dogs and we certainly didn't want any instead there.
Mr. Chair, I think it would be, I think it'd be helpful if they would put in as a requirement that guests receive maybe a link to or a copy of our noise ordinance so that they understand what is expected. Because that's something that could be one of those 3,
Right. Violations.
violations. So
We can certainly include it as part of the contract that, outside of Verbo that Ruby sends to the guests, but I'd probably push on us to find a better way to communicate it than to like bury it in paperwork.
Sure.
So maybe some signage in the house or something, or some of her communication, we can be very clear what the.
We don't usually take any more comments from the public. But I guess I can ask the board, if we would allow it.
Who's that?
One of the,
One of the owners?
Royce.
we don't usually.
I have to read it, I'm not sure.
Right, that's
the And-
last time I addressed that and just finally realized it's on the going to start.
Oh,
I know that that applies with respect to dogs barking. Because I looked,
well, like I said, that's something we'll have to discuss. And like I said, either put it in the conditions or give a copy of what the exact noise ordinance is for future rentals, so that wouldn't be an issue.
We don't have that spelled out. in the book.
either way, we can still make it as a requirement of
And
this.
that's
We
coming.
don't, but we did put that they need to receive a copy of the noise ordinance. We have a number of conditions.
Mhm.
Do you want me to read them?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Might be helpful.
Yeah. And y'all can sit down, I guess, because I don't need to stand up.
Screen all, sorry. Screen all potential guests and prohibit the following: large gatherings, pets, groups of guests under the age 25. Maintain a ring doorbell with camera at the front of the property to ensure the above. Keep the nightly rate at or over $500 per night and a nightly minimum of at least 2 nights. Require guests to agree to rules prohibiting the above. Remove all trash from property immediately following each rental or more frequently should the rental period be over 1 week. Keep the property maintained at all times, including hiring local businesses for housekeeping, landscaping, and other maintenance. The applicant will maintain a business license. All guests will park in the driveway, which can comfortably hold all guest vehicles. The property will meet all building codes for a rental unit, and the applicant understands that the county may inspect the home once per year. The property address will be placed in a position that is plainly legible from the street. There will be no recreational vehicles. No occupancy less than overnight will be allowed. The property owner's name and telephone number will be posted. The principal guest shall be at least 25 years of age. The max number of adult guests is limited to 6, and the applicant will remit any applicable lodging tax to the county. And also we've said no pets permitted, but that was already in here. And the guest to receive a copy of the noise ordinance. Kayaks and canoes are permitted, but no powered watercraft. And they have to meet all requirements of section 86-210 of the subdivision and zoning ordinance, which is pretty much spelled out in here.
One of the things, and I don't think it will pertain to this situation so much, but something we probably need to spell out in there, particularly since it's in the AC, and you touched on a little bit.
This is actually RR. It is permitted in the RR as well. with the
For R
C.
and AC.
Yeah.
It is the recreational vehicles. We may need to expand on that a little bit. And I could definitely see that becoming a problem if people were bringing their four-wheelers, their side-by-sides, their whatever.
You think we should specify that this particular condition or
Yes.
in general? So no,
We did have something in there, I
It
thought,
is in here.
about no
Yeah.
four-wheelers, but maybe we can expand on that just a little.
And then we added no powered watercraft.
I think maybe one condition I would add, just so that it's in writing, is the agreed upon fence between our property and the Bondurants, just to give them a little peace of mind.
and did you already install that or is that coming?
No, it's coming, but I mean, I had like Miss Utility out today, so I'm moving quickly.
Okay, that's something.
The only thing I'd like to really stress, Mr. Chair, is, I think it was Ms. Bonnarant when she spoke, she mentioned that, about the county having a plan for tourism. I'm not completely convinced that we have a solid plan in place. I think the biggest example of that is a lack of a transient occupancy tax. I would feel a lot more comfortable, as we look at possibility of more of these types of conditional use permits coming through to the county that, I don't know what the process is to get that, as a, priority. But I really do think that moving, as we look forward to not just 5 years from now, 10 years, 15 years, we need that, to be in place. I think that goes a long ways in telling people that, that's what we're looking for. Certainly bring, we want tourism, but also, we need to do what everybody else does, and then they charge a transient occupancy tax. So I think, as it currently stands, that's something we are missing out on as a county. As long as we're moving forward with that, I'm okay with this, with proceeding with
I
that.
have just one more condition I'd like to add. We do have a complaint requirement that if more than 3 complaints a year, the permit can be, we can consider removing, taking away the permit. What I would like to see with that, a lot of complaints would be called in. If they have a complaint and they called it in, that be followed up by a written complaint, written detail complaint. So that the planning staff has a good knowledge of exactly what that complaint may have been. With that, if I would recommend approval of the voters of the permit.
With those conditions. Okay, we have a motion made. Do we have a second with those additional conditions? I'll make the second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Trimmer, could you call the roll?
Mr. Cullen,
Aye.
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Mr. Sluter.
Aye.
Chairman Greenwood.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item we have on the agenda is public hearing number 2, changes to chapter 86, article XIX floods. Ms. Grant?
So recently there were changes to the flood maps. And making changes to the flood maps, the Department of Conservation and Recreation and the Federal Emergency Management Agency requires that we make amendments to our flood ordinance. They had recommended changes. We made those changes. They were reviewed by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. This went to the Board of Supervisors on November 28th. They approved a resolution to refer the changes to the Planning Commission. So you have the changes noted and read before you.
Board have any questions to ask Ms. Graham before we open the public comment period? I mean, not public comment, public hearing. If not,
So this is basically updating the FEMA maps.
The FEMA, well, they hadn't had it approved yet, but part of the approval process is making some amendments to our current ordinance. They're looking at the maps to be adopted in April of this year. Looking at them, it does not look like there are any changes to the residents in King William. Most of the changes are in the town of West Point, where they've been taken and more into the flood plain area.
So when they did this in Essex County a few years ago, it was kind of camouflaged the same way you're describing it. But what it did to just about every resident along the river was it raised the baseline of the floodplain, and it put people who had in the past not required flood insurance to now require flood insurance. So how is that going to impact waterfront properties in the county?
Really isn't going to affect them. I have not seen where any are going to be affected. I tried to get a number or any addresses, including the town of West Point. They were not able to provide that, only that they were in the town of West Point and not in the county. We have not had any homes since I've been here that have been constructed in the flood zone. We are lucky where not all, but most of our banks are highly elevated, which pulls you out of the flood zone.
I wanted to bring a point to what Mr. Kellum said, that it did affect me because I have riverfront property. My house is 69 feet above the river, and my house insurance said that I had to have flood insurance because of that. And I said it would never flood 69 feet above the sea level. And they
They
said I
have
had to
even-
get it anyway, but I fought them and got it taken care of. But that's why I guess why Mr. Wall was asking, because there wasn't an offer to me before, and I had to do it that year, but
Even if you are in a flood zone, it doesn't prevent
it
you
wasn't a
from
flood zone.
building. It's just you have to meet certain criteria.
Right.
You
That's
have to be 1.5 feet higher than the base flood elevation. You have to put in flood vents. All of your HVAC stuff has to be elevated 1.5 feet higher than the base flood elevation. But we also have the Ches Bay, which pulls you, 100 feet outside the RPA. So by the time you do that, you're probably going to be out of the flood zone anyway.
And maybe I don't understand this, but in Essex, it wasn't about being within the 100 foot of the floodplain or the RPA, all of that. When they raised the baseline of the water, they then said your house could flood, where historically they said it could not flood. And then the insurance goes from hundreds of dollars a year to thousands of dollars a year. And for people with mortgages, then they have to escrow that, and it becomes a nightmare. And so my question is this something we have any say so in, or just something because I'll give you one more example. Every house in the back section of Morrow Hill subdivision, surveyors had to be brought in to prove to FEMA that these houses 30, 40 feet above Moncune Creek were not in the floodplain. So again, I don't think this is something we should just gloss over. I think we really need to know what we're getting into and what are our options here.
Well, one of the reasons that we do some of this is that you can go through the National Flood Insurance Program, where flood insurance is available, whether or not you are in a flood zone. You can get flood insurance even if you're not in a flood zone. Flood insurance handles a lot of stuff, not just tidal water or waters from the creek. But say you have a substantial rainstorm and water backs up and it floods, it would handle something like that. But these are some of the criteria that they are requiring as part of the regulations. I do have the flood maps in my office where you can see where they are. But like I said, I did not see where anything in the county had changed. And when I questioned them, they told me it was in the town, not so much as in the county. But I see what you're talking about the base elevation, just if it's like 15 going to 18.
Basically, FEMA used it as a tool to, again, go from hundreds to thousands for all the waterfront properties. And again, over my head, I just want us to be sure, with no pun intended, we need to know what we're getting into here. And again, I agree with you. Most of the properties along the Pamunkey and the Mattaponi
Very high.
are elevated, but where Mr. Greenwood's at, again, 40, 50 feet above
And that's
the
still
river.
was
And I
required
think
by the
you ran
insurance.
into an issue with that.
Well, also keep in mind, this is something we need to do pretty quickly. We can look at it at the work session if you like. But another thing, part of the criteria to fall under this and be under the National Flood Insurance Program is so that we're eligible for funds and so forth in case there is an emergency and there is damage that, our citizens do have, access to this funding. That's important.
Have we in the past experienced a lot of issues with this?
We have not to my knowledge. Maybe it's somebody that's been here a lot longer. I just know that we've not issued a permit for a house in a flood zone. Not because we denied it, we did not. There just have not been any that have come in that are in a flood zone.
So, Mr. Chair, Ms. Graham, so this is an amendment. It's not a brand new ordinance.
No, these are changes that they want us to make. These are the changes that they suggest that we make to our ordinance to be in compliance.
So were they saying that our prior ordinance, as it stood, was insufficient for what their requirements were?
What the requirements are. And I'm sure it has changed over the years, and it's not just with us, but it's with other localities that are going through this as well.
And just to be clear, I mean, flood zone and RPA is two different
They're
things.
two different things. Mhm.
The RPA is basically the setback you have to be from the water or any vegetation associated with the water.
It's anything within 100 feet of wetlands.
Right.
Is considered resources protection area. So you are very limited as to what you can do in the resources protection area.
I guess we should go and open public hearing so to hear from the people, and I guess we can discuss more. So,
Sure.
thank you, Ms. Graham.
Somebody made the.
Right, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I will now open the public hearing for changes to chapter 86, article XIX with the floods. So if anyone has any comments, 3 minutes. Anybody online? Don't have any experts out there. So if you're seeing nobody speaking, I'll close public hearing and we'll go back to discussion. Do we want to?
Mr. Chairman, this has got, the board referred this back to us, so we've got to make a recommendation to the board. I would move that we recommend approval based on additional information that we may provide prior to the board meeting.
A second for that. I'll make a second just to get it on the table and we'll see how the vote goes. Any other discussion?
I do have one question on the language in here, Ms. Graham. Under section 86-557, under definitions, and it's also mentioned again. Under section 86-571. I'm just gonna read straight from this. It has a pertinent or accessory structure, a non-residential structure, which is on the same parcel of property as a principal structure, and the use of which is incidental to the use of the principal structure. So there's the definition for that type of structure, and then it adds accessory structures are not to exceed 600 square feet. My first question is, shouldn't that requirement of accessory structures be stricken from the definition? And since it's already in section 86-571.
One is under definition. And then the other one is under elevation and construction standards.
Okay. Right. My second question with this was, how was the 600 square feet? How was that brought about? Was
That was their
that was their
recommended
recommendation?
requirement.
Okay, their recommendation, or was that the requirement?
I'm sorry.
Was that their recommendation or was that their
That
requirement?
was one of their requirements to put in here.
I think everything in red is what they
what they-
suggested. It's not anything that we did, it's what they, yeah. And all counties have to do this, right?
Everybody that's going through the map revisions, they have to go through this process.
And do we want to set a time for the, I'd like to say, go Mr. Wagner, going through the, have to work on the next board section for the,
I would say we can do it at the next board session.
okay. You think you can come up with the quick answers, Ms. Graham, before we go to the next board session?
What,
Mr. Wagner said the few
So
issues
that the motion was that we approve it based on our review and recommendations for any changes to the board. And we can do that at our next board session. It's not good reading, but it's not difficult.
We have a motion on the floor, properly seconded. Any more discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Trimmer?
Mr. Pelham,
Nay.
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Mr. Sluter,
Nay.
Chairman Greenwood.
I'm going to abstain because I was the one that wanted to bring it to this board. So if we don't have all people on board, I don't think I should vote on this. So maybe we should come up with another. Does anyone have another idea?
Well, I would like to, at our next work session, certainly dive into this and talk some more about it, but this is something that I deal with quite a bit, and you've had some experience with it. I don't know all the ramifications of this before we vote on it one way or the other. I mean, I'd like to be able to sit down in a work session and really talk about it and have some specific examples of people it's probably going to impact and how it's going to impact them, and a dollar value of how it's going to impact them.
I understand that, but as we also said, if we don't, we had to vote on it last time also, didn't we, Ms. Graham? And we didn't, but like I said, we can still talk about it, maybe find out what the implications are before we decide whether or not to pass it on or not. So maybe we should push it up to our next work. Do we want to do it on the one we have well, we haven't really said it exactly, but early January, we want to put it on that one?
I would say so. As she says, timing is critical. It's.
Yeah.
Yeah, just give us
So
an
we could-
opportunity to talk about it a little more.
Right.
Before we make a final recommendation. to the
Yes.
board.
So let me ask Jerry a question, because I've gone through this in the past, and stuff like when they change things, for different homeowners, and it did impact them. So there was an appeal process for the homeowners, but it did affect, so Jerry, would that be the case again for the homeowners?
And not just with this, but anybody that can appeal the flood zone determination. They can appeal this if they feel like their elevation of the land is higher than the base flood elevation requirement. So just as an example, 25 is a base flood elevation requirement, but the land is already at 30 feet. They can request that their property get taken out. And if they provide the evidence, it can be taken out. And they normally will do something like that.
They wouldn't do it for me.
Did you, I mean, if I can go over
I had
some
to
of that
fight
with you
for it.
if you
Like I said,
like.
there's no way, like I said, if my house floods from the Mattapony River, the whole state of Virginia would be underwater. So
But-
I had to fight with them. It's been a lot of money to get it out of it.
But you did appeal and they.
Yeah, finally. But like you said, it was just because it was raised. But like I said, there's no way that even if it's 3 feet difference, if my house is 69 feet up.
Now, somebody that has, and I'm gonna just use it as an example. The corner of their house may touch it. They're not gonna get it taken out. But if their house is completely out of it and it is, above, a lot of times they'll take it out of the flood zone then as well.
And I know you weren't in office at that time, and I don't know how I got on that list. Like you said, when, whatever that ordinance change was, and like I said, I shouldn't have been on it anyway, but it was a lot of people. Do we have a list of homeowners that
I
will
tried to get
affect?
it and I was told I could not
Uh,
get it. However, I went to a training that DCR had a few weeks ago. And she was telling me that I could request it. However, I could not give if they provide that to me, I would not be able to provide it to the public, that it was private.
You could provide it to us. We could go into closed session.
Yes.
Uh,
yes,
If
and
you
I
could
can-
try to
I
do
can
that,
work on it and see if
Yeah.
I can get it.
that would be good to help us.
They did tell me that it didn't have any in the county that had changed. They said everything was
That
in
would
the
be a
town.
nice thing to know.
Yeah,
Right.
but I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
So if we have some houses in the county that are marginal. I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I think in Essex County, they raised it 13 to 16 feet.
A lot.
It was a
That would
lot.
be all of West Point.
Yeah. So that's the answers I want. I mean, if they're talking about raising it, are they talking about raising it a foot, 2 foot, 5 foot, 10 foot?
Yeah,
And let's be clear here. This is an opportunity. If they get what they want and we raise it, that's an opportunity to go through and charge everybody a higher insurance rate. Is that a pretty fair statement?
it would depend, and they're telling me that we don't have any of that in the county. But yeah, say if you have a house that is in a base flood elevation of 13, they raise it to 15. So now you're 2 feet below, then your insurance would increase. Now, there are things you can do, but of course, if the structure itself is 2 feet below, other than elevating your home, there's not a whole lot you can do there, but if you are elevated above what you need to be and you just need flood vents or something like that, that is a simple fix.
And they actually just had a big push in Matthews County to elevate houses.
That happens a lot when you have a storm that comes through and there's substantial damage. And people with flood insurance, if you've gotten damaged 50% or more, then you are eligible for something called ICC money, where they will give you up to $30,000 to raise or elevate your home or to tear your home down and build a foundation that's above the base flood elevation.
And I think that's what they did in Matthews, but $30,000 raising a house,
Mhm.
6 to 8 courses, doesn't go a long ways.
No, it used to before all of this came through about 15, 16 years ago. And then when the contractors found out that, hey, I can get $30,000, it was 30,000 plus to raise them. Which, I mean, some of your larger homes, I can see it. Some of your smaller homes, that's a lot of money. But that was one of the perks of having insurance. They did provide that $30,000 to help people raise.
Tom, do you want to make a motion to table it to the?
Let's-
Mr. Wade?
Let's, I move that we table it until we can get the information and discuss it in a closed session.
Ms.
I
Graham, I
would,
guess.
I would second that.
Ms. Graham, you'll let us know when you get the information, so then we can decide the proper date for the.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? No? Ms. Turner?
Mr. Pelham,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Mr. Schluter.
Aye.
Chairman Bridges.
Aye, motion is tabled. Sorry that took so long. Next item we have, third public comment, public hearing for the night, Z-02-22, MHF Properties LLC. Ms. Graham, do you have the presentation, or does the owner have the presentation?
Okay, so tonight we have one request for rezoning. This is to go for a planned unit development. And this is MHF Properties LLC. And we have a PowerPoint, but the applicant also has a PowerPoint. This property is located at the intersection of 30 and 360. It's currently zoned R1. And is currently farmland. And the applicant is requesting that the property be rezoned for planned unit development. This proposed use would be a mix of single-family homes, townhomes, apartments, and commercial parcels. This property consists of approximately 166.8 acres. There is and it's showing both sides of the road, but it is on the upper side. And not the lower portion.
That was actually my question, because there's been a rezoning sign.
It got removed. It was put there wrong.
It was removed today, but it's been there.
Yeah.
For over a week.
But no, that side has nothing to do with this rezoning. It is in the Transportation Corridor Overlay District. So any use in this area would have to adhere to all the TCO requirements. This is all the commercial end because the high density single family will be on the backside. You should not see that from the highway. The property would be available to public water, public sewer. Of course, fire and emergency services would be provided by King William Fire Department and the Mango Hick Fire Department. Any entrances or changes relative to this use would require review and approval by VDOT. The traffic impact analysis has been submitted to VDOT. You've gotten comments in your packet. Green Light Solutions are also addressing some comments that VDOT had at their November letter. So they are working with VDOT to try to get those resolved. A couple of things with this. Recommend that they meet all requirements listed in our ordinance. All entrances be designed with enhancing characteristics. Require attractive landscaping in the corridor area of the project. All aspects of the project be pedestrian friendly. Height of all buildings not to exceed 45 feet. The applicant is requesting a 20-foot front setback. There is no street parking except on the townhouses. So therefore, Planning Commission may want to consider an additional 5 feet on those single family homes. Also may want to limit the number of permits or certificate of occupancies to be issued for residential construction until some of the commercial development starts. In your later, well, we actually emailed it to you. The applicant has offered some cash proffers. Did each of you get those? Okay. So the cash proffers are $1 million to be paid to the county prior to the issuance of 50% of the total allowable residential, single family, townhouse and or apartments, certificate of occupancies. Should King William County impose impact fees at any time during the life of the development that are applicable to the property, the amount paid in cash proffers shall be in lieu of or credited toward, but not in addition to, any impact fees in a manner determined by the county. At the option of King William County, cash proper payments may be reduced for a cost of off-site improvements to the adjacent King William County Recreational Park, including roads, parking lot, ball fields, indoor water line, provided by the applicant, subdivider, or assignees, as determined by the county administrator or assignees. You've had several notes from, I think, Mr. Wagner on some of his reviews. A couple of things, we did have a conceptual plan that was submitted in a pre-application meeting held on September 19th. The formal application along with the master plan, community impact statement, design manual, and traffic impact analysis were submitted on November 1st. Missing from the master plan, proposed square footage of commercial buildings. These should be submitted at the site plan, with the site plan, prior to review and of approval of the permits. The general location of water, sewer, and permanent erosion and sediment control and stormwater structures. And that would be submitted on the site plan prior to review and approval of the permits. Missing from the design manual, phasing schedule. The developer notes that this will be determined yearly. They have noted that this is a 10-year build out on the project. Missing from the community impact statement, stormwater management plan. This will require plan submittal review and approval by DEQ. Under general standards of development, the developer exceeds the minimum district size and density necessary. So if you don't have any issues with that. Streets, the developer is proposing that the streets be private. The cul-de-sac will need to be large enough to allow for fire trucks or buses to turn around. And that would require a 100-foot radius in the cul-de-sacs. The height, the developer does indicate in the master plan that the height of some of the structures could be 100 feet. The max height for structures is 3 stories or 45 feet. The gross floor area. Commercial buildings plans have not been submitted at this time. So it's kind of hard to come up with that one. When the preliminary site plan and final site plans are submitted, the developer will need to address the commercial structures, parking, landscape plan, and screening. The ordinance does call for parking to be located predominantly to the side and or rear of the buildings. Okay, so we have 2 PowerPoints, but they're not too long here. Okay, I'm going to turn it. And you saw the aerial. This is a zoning. The color didn't turn out very good, but everything in the light color is R1. Okay. That's our future land use map, which shows that this is in an area for high density. And that's just blown up a little bit. And that red is the mixed use. That's an old farmhouse that is on the property. The developers are supposed to be tearing that down. And that is looking across from the entrance to Food Line. Right. And that's the 360 entrance. And that's looking across from Sharon. Okay. All right. And we do have the owner and developers here they also have a PowerPoint for you. I'll be glad to answer any questions I can, and they're here to give you their overview as well.
Any members have questions for Ms. Graham now, or wait till
I have a question.
yes.
Ms. Graham, is the property at the corner of 30 and 360 where the old Burger King was located. Is that a part of the future land use map for Bud?
No, that is actually its own parcel, that was already zoned for business.
Thank you.
One of the things I looked for, and maybe I overlooked it, what are the proposed square footages?
I'll let them address that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't think we have it on the commercial yet. They can give you probably an average.
But the residential, I mean, are we going to have something, you know, single story, 2-story, size of apartments, size of townhouses?
I will let them address it. I know that, they do have a couple different plans, that they are proposing.
Thanks for sharing. Guess we'll listen to the applicant's final point and then open public hearing after that, and then have more discussion.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Ms. Graham. My name is Ann Miller. I'm a planner with Balzer and Associates representing the applicant this evening. Before we get started with our presentation, I just wanted to introduce a couple more people from our team. From my office, I do have Andy Scherzer, a landscape architect and representative of the applicant, as well as Todd Chalmers, the head engineer on the project. We also have John and Jay Naparlo from MHF Properties, who are the current property owners and applicants. Don Balzer with Branchway Development, and Eric Strohacker with Greenlight Solutions, who did the traffic impact analysis. So they're here to help with the presentation and answer any questions you may have. So as Sherry pointed out, the property is located at the intersection of Route 360 and 30. MHF Properties have only required the properties on the west side of 360, which is totaling about 166 acres. The property is raw land, some of which has been farmed and some of it has remained forested. There are a few existing structures on the property that are proposed to be removed, and it's currently zoned R1. Next slide. So as she mentioned, the comprehensive plan, which was recently updated and approved last year, designates this area as mixed-use plan unit development. One of the notes in the comprehensive plan states Central Garage is positioned as a major center for business and development along the busy Route 360 corridor. The area is identified for continued growth for both businesses and residential uses. So with that in mind, we are proposing to rezone the property to a planned unit development, PUD, with a mixture of commercial and residential land uses, all served by extensions of public utilities and connected by roads and pedestrian systems, while preserving existing environmental features on the property. Next slide. So the report you received from us in the packet has all the information regarding this proposal, including elements of the master plan, design manual, and community impact statement. So the proposed PUD has a mixture of commercial and residential, as noted, strategically located to fit within the existing character of Central Garage, while also considering the goals of the comprehensive plan. The larger commercial area, Tract A, is positioned at the corner of routes 360 and 30 for high visibility, with additional commercial space along the frontage of Route 360. The commercial area, Tract B, that commercial area, which is known as Tract B, is envisioned to accommodate different out parcels fronting Route 360 with a commercial access road in the rear. So that commercial access road could be private and maybe within other commercial tracts to serve the commercial, but all the other roadways you see are proposed to be public and taken into the state system. To provide transitions between the commercial and residential tracts, we do have buffers shown, while also concentrating the denser residential, including the townhouses and the multifamily, directly behind the commercial, with more traditional single family lots towards the rear of the property. After conversations with some folks in the county, we have also incorporated some flex tracts, as you can see in purple and yellow on this plan, to allow for a mixture of uses in those areas. Depending on the market and final engineering, it may be better suited to have different uses in those areas as outlined in our report on pages 2 and 3. We do show a few accesses along Route 360 to serve the development, including a full access in the middle that would act as the main access into the development with a boulevard entrance, sidewalks, and landscaping to give an identity to this mixed-use community. As you can see, there will be interconnected roadways, pedestrian scale streetscapes with street trees, houses with shallow setbacks adjacent to sidewalks to promote community and connectivity, different lot sizes to accommodate a range of housing sizes and styles, and programmable open space, including dog parks. We have one shown in the townhouse section and one between the single family and townhouse. Focal point and orchard area in the townhouse tract, and a trail system within the townhouse tract and along the RPA and the single family tract for all residents to enjoy. The development also proposes a direct connection to King William County Recreational Park to allow residents to access the public area in various ways by vehicle, walking, or biking. Next slide, please. This is the same master plan, but in black and white to show a bit more detail. As you can see along routes 360 and 30, we will maintain that 35-foot buffer that is required by the transportation corridor overlay, which includes a 25-foot landscape buffer and a 10-foot area for future road or pedestrian improvements. The entire site will be served by public water and sewer with a proposed pump station in the single family tract. As noted in the community impact statement, all residential units, including single family, townhouses, and apartments, will utilize gas, heat, and hot water in conjunction with Virginia Natural Gas, bearing on any unforeseen issues, which would bring natural gas further up Route 360 to serve this entire area, including any commercial that wanted to utilize that same service. You can also see on this plan that we do have the in the top corner some typical lot layouts. So to your point, we do have two versions of the single family, a 60 by 100 and a 75 by 100 lots. And then with the setbacks, those have kind of the buildable areas that could be built in that, but we're envisioning 2-story single family homes. And then the townhouses have a buildable area of 20 by 100. There are existing environmental features on the north side of the property, including wetlands that will be preserved per the resource protection area. We envision the trail system to meander along those environmental features, connecting to sidewalks at different locations to promote the walkability and connection to the commercial adjacent park and all the internal amenities. So the applicant has offered to pay $1 million in cash proffer payments, as Sherry noted. It is also because of the master plan envisioned for the adjacent park and our understanding that there are several desires about what that park would look like. That's why we have proffered to use the cash proffer money or build improvements in lieu of cash proffer payments if the county sees fit. Next slide, please. So the design manual in the report speaks to the envisioned architectural treatment of the different tracks, including high quality materials for the facades and roofing. We have also included conceptual images for the various products, including the commercial multifamily buildings as shown here. The final architecture designs will depend on the end users, but all buildings and their overall development design will be cohesive because it will adhere to the information contained in this report and will be reviewed and approved by county staff. Next slide. And then here's a single family and townhouse conceptual images, which also include high quality materials and facades. There are also images showing the streetscapes, which will include sidewalks and landscaping as previously stated. And all roads that will accommodate general traffic will be constructed to VDOT standards and be state maintained. So with that also, per VDOT standards, on-street parking would not be prohibited. We're just not showing designated areas at the moment. So with that, we ask for your recommendation for approval this evening and are available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. So, board will have questions to begin with.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. We have gone through a lot leading up to this point. We specified this as PUD development in our in our comprehensive plan. And we have a lot of dreams for what that's going to be. We're not opposed, and anything we say tonight is not intended to be opposed to this development at all. But we have a lot of questions that have not been answered. And I do want to present some of those questions to you now. And if I may, I will read this. Wish I could remember it all, but I can't. But this is, first of all, pertaining to the traffic impact analysis. The document submitted for this application included in the community impact statement, a traffic impact analysis, TIA. VDOT's review of the TIA dated October 24, 2022, and November 18, 2022, noted numerous deficiencies in the TIA and listed several design requirements that are necessary for VDOT's approval of the TIA. The dates of VDOT's responses were just prior to and 18 days after the November 1st, 2022 submission of the application for rezoning for a PUD development. The application should not have been submitted until such time as the issues cited by VDOT were resolved to the satisfaction of VDOT for approval. Until such time as there is a resolution to VDOT's requirements, the issues with access to the commercial development on Route 30 cannot be resolved, and access for other properties may be jeopardized. The access issues, including crossover design and signalization on Route 360, cannot be resolved until the requested distance between the entrances have been provided and requirements for alternatives for signalization, Site 8, the primary entrance to the subdivision, can be resolved. The location of the entrance may also require redesign of the internal streets if the entrance has to be relocated. Traffic counts for the internal public street segments have not been provided as required by VDOT and is required to determine functional classification of internal streets. The functional classification is critical to the design of the streets and issues on or off-street parking. Comments in regard to the master plan. Item 1, proposed square footage for commercial buildings. This information was included in the TIA to provide needed information for AM, PM, peak hour traffic counts, except for the convenience store. The convenience store, as I pointed out, VDOT has pointed out, they need that information in order to make a final determination on the location of the entrances and what they will allow for that site. We need that information before we can make a decision. Item 14, the applicant has not provided action of or description of proposed common open space, the description of proposed improvements in landscaping, an active and passive recreation area. Access to the county recreational park is positive. However, this does not substitute for the internal open space and recreational areas or facilities that we would expect. In regard to the design manual was provided, refers for the most part to compliance with its section of the ordinance rather than to specific requirements for plans, typical drawings, and depictions of building types with elevations and design, and how the residential structures relate to the lots with building heights, lengths, and depths, and depiction of facades, roads, etc. For instance, the housing that you just showed, those photographs do not show the relation to the lots and the relation to other adjacent properties. It does not appear, in looking at some of those designs, that they would fit on the 60-foot to 80-foot lot, or what is it, 60-foot and 80-foot, I believe. But it does not appear they would fit on those. We need to know that the houses will fit on those lots and will do meet the requirements of the 5-foot setbacks on the sides. The ordinance requires a elevation the depth of the lot, depth of the house, the width of the house, the elevation, and the depth. Those things are required in a depiction of the house on the property. The pedestrian system, first of all, does the pedestrian system outside VDOT right of way meet ADA requirements for grades, surfaces, et cetera?
So we will follow any requirements or regulations that the county has,
We-
for,
We will need to have that information. It's, you know, all there, within our requirements, within our ordinance, there are several variations that can be used on that. We will need that information.
Okay.
So that we can work with it. I believe on our sidewalks and trails, I believe in impervious surfaces required. You're showing a stone dust. I don't know whether a biker or a wheelchair could travel on that stone dust or not. I'm not familiar with stone dust being used, but anything like this. Amenities along the pedestrian trail, such as shelters, benches, and trash receptacles, are not provided in the design manuals. No mention of them. A phasing schedule has not been provided. Response from Balzer Associates indicates the phasing will depend on the market and will be provided year to year. Phasing, as required, should be designed or should be provided with the design manual to provide goals and conditions of development. Changes in market conditions can be reviewed and approved by staff with submission of the impact on the marketing impact. So I think we need that phasing, those phasing requirements as best that they can be provided at this time, understanding that marketing conditions may well change. I think all of us remember 2008. For 5 years, we didn't have hardly a building built in this county because of that. And things like that can happen. You hear rumors that we're going to have a recession next year, and that could impact what you're doing. But there's several other things, and we can, the rest of the members of staff can address those. But I think one of the major things when we look at the requirements and the requirement, here it says that a complete application eligible for public hearing shall consist of a master plan, a design manual, and community impact statement. You have the requirements for each one of those. What you have provided doesn't answer all those questions. You've given us something on a scale when we get the large scale plan, a scale of 1 inch to 200 feet. You don't have the detail on that we require, that we should have. We should be looking at something similar to, and if we go through the ordinances and the reference to the ordinance, it refers to site plan, preliminary site plan development. What we're looking at now should be a preliminary site plan. That so that we can read and understand the requirement, that the requirements in this are being met. We can't do that. The information on Route 30 and Route 360, you don't show the medians. You haven't shown the crossovers as required by VDOT. You haven't done the alternative studies. Looking at the peak hour traffic, it looks like that major entrance has problems. We don't want to end up with more problems. We want to end up with a good development that'll be attractive, that'll attract people, that'll bring people to this county, that will in fact be a resource for the development of this county for future development Route 360. So that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions?
I actually have a laundry list of questions if you want to do it now or.
Seems like we are, and then I guess we'll go into the public hearing after that.
Well, I think a lot of this stuff has already been brought to light, but you know, my take on this is I represent the third district, and these are questions that have come to me from the third district, so I'm just kind of, don't shoot the messenger here, I'm just kind of relaying, but I think they're good questions and they need some answers. So one of the biggest ones, it's at the top of the list here, are the square footages. I mean, you showed some elevations here that showed some two-story houses, but are they 1,800 square feet or are they 2,000 square feet? I think everyone would like to see a little bit more detail, a little more information on that, because obviously we do not want a development of smaller houses. I think we need to know what the minimums are. The proposed apartments and flex areas, you show the apartments on here. The flex areas, could they potentially become more apartments? If apartments were selling better than, say, single family or townhouses, are you proposing that you would put more apartments in the flex areas?
We have in the report that the apartments could go into kind of the commercial A area if that was what the market called for. But we have capped it that there can be no more than 300 apartments. The density is 24 units to the acre, and we didn't want to, have enough acreage that you could have 800 apartments, knowing that that's probably not the desire for this area. So we have capped it at 300 apartments if it were to be more than the 200 we show on this master plan.
Okay, so you could, the 200 on the master plan, but you could potentially have 100 additional apartments.
Correct.
Okay. The apartments, are any of them going to be set aside for 55 and older, or what's the criteria there?
We have not designated that at this time, but the flex track kind of B area, which is the yellow area on the I guess west side of the property from the concept plan, but or east side, sorry. That is set aside that could have some age restricted apartments if the market called for that. And I think the developers are certainly open to age restriction if the market calls for it. They just haven't designated a certain area at this time.
The next question is more for Ms. Graham or staff, but I know you're aware of the question that's come about fire protection. Currently, what is their arrangement with the adjacent counties in the event that we have a fire and we do not have the proper equipment to service 3-story tall buildings?
We do have mutual aid with some of the adjacent counties. I'm not sure which counties have ladder. I know that Hanover probably does. I do not think Tappahannock does, or Essex County, or King and Queen.
So could we potentially, and this is going to be a legal question, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Could we potentially, by allowing more apartment builds, 200, possibly 300, be setting the county up for a potential lawsuit in the event there was an emergency and we could not properly serve the residents of that building? Do we have an agreement with these counties where we already have some 3-story apartment buildings in the county, whether or not they should have been approved or not, I don't know, but will they only cover us for a certain amount, or will they cover us for an additional 200 to 300 units?
That I don't know.
And I think that's a great question for the county attorney. Again, in the event someone was harmed, could they come back on the county and say, you knew you did not have the proper equipment to service a 3-story building? Because I believe a 3-story building does require a ladder truck.
And we probably need to ask Chief Reeves on this, but I believe even a ladder truck is going to have trouble getting up to 45 feet in height. I don't think it will reach that far. But please consult with Chief Reeves. We can try to have him, discuss that. That's his field of expertise. So.
Okay. We talked about the phasing, the commercial areas. We talked about, if the demand's not there, not building the commercial areas right away, or maybe there's some phasing. Again, I had asked the question, those commercial areas really do not fall under TCO requirements until a building permit is applied for, correct?
That's correct.
So
Site plan approval.
So those areas, the strip along 360, the proposed box store, those areas, we really have no regulation on how those would be maintained prior to a commercial client coming in. And I guess that's a question for you guys. I mean, what's that area gonna look like? Because that's really what you're gonna see from 360 when you ride by. We can't require berming or trees or anything like that until a building permit is applied for. So what's the plan? Is that strip gonna be, continue to be farmed? How is it gonna be maintained? Is it gonna be grass?
I might have to refer to the applicant, but my understanding was if the site plan was approved, would the buffer have to be maintained, or is that till building permit?
Well, depending on where the buffer is, if it's on the side where the townhouses are, we would have to put that in before we finalize the townhouses,
Okay,
but it would have to be put in.
right. So if we did like a site plan for pad ready sites along 360, would that TCO buffer be triggered even if it's just a pad ready site?
If you are getting a site plan approved, you're gonna have to have that on there.
Okay,
Before we finalize the building, the buffer has to be in place, all your planting, all your structural BMPs, anything like that have to be in place.
okay. So that would be in place. And then, I think talking to the applicant and the developers, once those are developed as pad ready sites, which they're gonna wanna do pretty quickly to market them for commercial entities, they'll be mowed and maintained, and because they want this to be, it's also the entrance to the residential, so they're gonna build that boulevard entrance and the sidewalks through that main access to allow people to come up to the residence. So they'll maintain those and until they're ready to be developed as a commercial site.
The second part of that question, the development of the commercial sites, will they be to a point with utilities where if someone comes along, they're pretty much ready to go?
Yes,
Which as a county, I think it's kind of what we're looking for, is to have some sites ready to go. So if we get a potential client,
mhm.
it's zoned, water, sewer, utilities there, it's ready to go.
Yes, and they want to do the same thing, and with the residential, they're gonna have to bring the water and sewer from Route 360 up to those areas, so they will come in first with the commercial. With the rest, or with the other infrastructure, like the road improvements, the natural gas, the broadband, and all of those to come in to serve the residential, so they'll be ready for the commercial. So we see that as kind of enticing the commercial to come as well. If all the entitlements are complete, the construction is started on the property, people see that residents are going in, more commercial entities will be want to develop there.
One thing, another two-part question here. One thing the site plan does not show, but currently throughout King William County, HRSD has had a horrible design of alleyways behind houses for water and sewer.
Mhm.
Have you guys been able to overcome that and put the utilities in the middle of the street where they belong, or are they gonna force us to follow the path that they forced us to follow in the past, which it was a horrible design?
Understood. I think I'll have to ask Chalmers. He's been working with them on another project anyways. Sewer is in the road and water is right adjacent to the road.
Okay, so none of the concrete trails behind the houses that we have in our other neighborhoods now. Okay. The water and connection fees, where do they go?
The water is paid to the county, sewers paid to agency.
Okay, so the water connection fees come directly to the county and the sewer connection fees go to HRSD.
Yes.
And do we know what those connection fees will be?
We do get some of the sewer as well. You know what their fees are? Yeah, if it's a 5/8 inch meter, water meter. $8,000 for water and $4,000 of the sewer comes through the county.
How does that work in the apartments?
It's based on your water meter size, so the more water consumption, the larger your meter is going to be. So it really is going to depend. I mean, if they're putting in sprinkler system in the apartments, That's gonna be, more water usage needed, for what the water pressure, and I'm not sure what the fees are as you get larger with the water meter.
So 200 apartments would pay individual water and sewer connection fees. It wouldn't be like on the entire building.
It depends on how they run their meters.
Okay.
So, and they may have already come up with an idea on that one.
And the last one, I think well, two things. I think you already addressed one of them. Currently, on the maps we have that doesn't show up on your site plan, there's the blue line stream kind of running through the middle of the property. And the second part of that question, something that the late great Charlie LaFawn, who was here 20-some years ago, used to insist upon was when things like this were developed, the roads were stubbed into other parcels to allow for future access. I see y'all have a couple access points on there, which I like. The middle area here over towards Benner Road seems to leave a little bit of a gap there. I don't know if it's possible or if the RPA presents that or not, but there are a couple large parcels on the backside of that it would really open up if a road were to be stubbed in somehow to those parcels. And again, maybe the RPA presents it. I mean, prevents you from doing that, but you have one towards the front going out towards Venner. And of course, you have the one on 30 and the one to the ballpark, but that whole right-hand section is a little underserved.
Yes, I believe it's because of the RPA. I mean, we could look further into that, but my understanding is crossing that RPA would be very difficult to do. And then we can check on the streams, but I know our wetlands department at Balzer has been out there and walked the property and is doing the delineation and all of that, which is all part of the environmental impact analysis and our community impact statement. So I think what we have shown is what they have seen out there, and that's been submitted to the Corps for review.
Well, I think for me, and again, you answered all the questions wonderfully. Thank you for that. And again, these are questions that have come from people that I've talked to mostly in the 3rd district. I think the only thing that's really looming out there for me is if the county has any potential liability, allowing more apartments and potentially not being able to serve them. So I guess that's something we can work on to get some answers to.
Yeah, that would be great to know. We didn't see anything in the fire code about a ladder truck, but we do understand that there's stipulations about the ingress egress, width of the fire lanes to serve those units that will meet, and they'll all be sprinklered per code if they're larger than 30 feet.
And I'm assuming this would be Mr. Hudgens, but water supply, water pressure, that's all ample there to be able to supply everything we would need in the event of an emergency. At this time, that's part of the water advance project is that we both did through.
Mr. Slater, I know you had a bunch of questions. You want to go ahead and answer those now too?
I've got a book as well. I'll make it short. Actually, a lot of my questions have already been answered, but I do have a couple that are more, I guess, design oriented. First, in the overall project description, it does list, it says, the tract shall generally be as follows. Number one, commercial tract A shall be a minimum of 15 acres and a maximum of 33 acres. I see on the plat, it's listed at just under 33 acres, but I guess my question was, there's a range there, obviously, and it's a large range, as far as, amount of land. What are we looking at there?
I think that was to Mr. Cullen's point earlier. We have looked at the multifamily were more popular and market driven to allow more apartments, and that could kind of feed back more into the commercial tract A area. And so that's kind of why we have that range, just to provide some more flexibility in the future once we kind of see where it's going.
Okay. I see there's some open spaces listed on here. It looks like a dog park, a couple of dog parks. There's an orchard area as well. That is kind of in an area, it looks like most of those are right there in the townhouse tract. Is there Was there a reason to put those in that particular location within the townhouse tract as opposed to using it as more of a transition to some of the other types of development?
Yeah, so for a couple of reasons, I think, you know, the townhouse tract, they usually don't have, you know, much of a yard per the townhouses. So this kind of gives them more of a focal or a focused area for their dogs and to take them out to play and things like that, when the single family homes typically have a bigger yard, you know, on their individual lot. It's also just kind of centrally located, so most of the residents could get there from the different tracts as well. The orchards area was kind of a homage to what's been there in the past with the farming, and so the developer was thinking maybe putting fruit trees or nut trees or something like that that could also serve the residents and kind of become a gathering spot. And then we do have the dog park that kind of straddles the single family and townhouse tract. And also because of the environmental features that come within the townhouse tract, it kind of provided more open space to protect that area, which is why those are a little bit more open.
I do see that our ordinance requires no less than 25% of the net developmental area for open space. Do you know what percentage y'all have?
I think we're right around 25 to 30%. And we have, you know, taken out the RPA wetlands and the steep slopes, which are kind of shown on the black and white. There's a couple steep slopes in the townhouse section. But yes, we will definitely meet that requirement.
I would like to see the acreage.
Okay.
Just as y'all have noted the acreage on the commercial tracts and townhouse tracts and so forth, I'd like to see the actual open spaces as well. We're looking at, well, I guess you take out the non-developmental area, you could have as many as 20, 25 acres, is what I'm guessing. The other question I had is regarding the phasing schedule. And I know that the market can change on a dime, obviously. We've all seen that happen before. I'm assuming y'all would be having an annual meeting to discuss the different phases and so forth and moving forward with that. Do you know what market analytics y'all will be using to decide how to move forward with the different phases?
I am not sure. I might have to ask either Don or John if you all know about any market analytics.
So I think the general answer, my name is John DeParlo with MHF Properties. The general answer is it is market driven, as you alluded to. You know, especially, you know, from a housing perspective, the sales are going to generate moving quicker to different phases. But I think all indicators are still saying that that market is much needed, especially in the greater central Virginia region. From a commercial standpoint, again, I think Ann has also mentioned that we're planning to prepare pretty early in the process to have the commercial lots ready. So, I mean, that's kind of the best we can do. Is they're going to be available. All utilities, they'll be essentially pad ready. Everybody has a different definition of that, but we do plan to have them pretty much ready to go where somebody can go vertical with it. And that should happen very early in the process.
As it pertains to the phasing schedule, our ordinance does ask for an approximate number of residential units by type or class to be developed per year, and an explicit link between the timing of the development of residential, non-residential, and commercial components. I didn't see that in y'all's report. Is that something that, once again, keeping in mind the changing market, I think we would all feel more comfortable at least seeing a first phase, tentative plan as far as some numbers goes, if that's something that y'all could also come up with.
Okay, I think we have kind of noted, and I guess our responses back to the letter that we received from staff, that, you know, the residential developer does anticipate 40 to 50 residential units, either single family and or townhouses per year. And that's kind of the first phase he's looking at, and typical section of 40 to 50 residential. So that would, anticipating that the first section.
If that schedule were to verify, how quickly would commercial follow suit with that?
So again, I think the answer on the commercial end is the commercial readiness would be complete by phase two, at the end of phase two. And at that point, we'll be fully marketed, trying to certainly garner users to come into the area. We've reached out to many people in the county, met with some of the staff here, and heard some of the desires, I guess, for services and retail in the community. We've been active already, but unfortunately, the build it and they will come mentality, it just doesn't work anymore. The Amazon effect, a lot of things shifting very frequently, very rapidly, and not to mention COVID more recently. I mean, everything has just gone upside down. So you kind of have to have a bird in the hand.
I know that Mr. Wagner alluded to some VDOT issues or concerns that they had some of the turns, intersections, so forth. If y'all had a chance to respond to any of those, as far as the design, is that going to change? Do you foresee it changing your ingress and egress to the development, so forth? Do you foresee the potential that it could drastically change the overall design of the development? Any of those questions can you answer?
I don't believe it will drastically change. We are in the process of responding back to VDOT and understand that we'll have to do whatever they recommend and approve. But I will invite Eric Strohacker up and probably touch on a couple of those comments and questions you all have from the TIA.
Good evening. My name is Eric Strohacker, traffic engineer, Greenlight Solutions. And your question was related to the access, the plan of access, how it might change per the VDOT comment, the initial VDOT review process. The main focus was, there were 2 points, and I think Mr. Wagner's touched on some of them in his questions, but the first point is Virginia 30. Route 30, the accesses that we're proposing along Virginia Route 30. There was a initial thought that we could create an interim access plan if the hard corner develops on its own. And the hard corner, I'm just calling it the Burger King property. And that would allow them to have full access for their site until such time that the site would develop out. And we could add additional points of access, which would then become the full access for that site. We have since, from the comment and the current, the revisions that we're doing in the TIA that we're going to resubmit, we are not proposing to do that. We're going to keep that Burger King access plan where we were proposing a full access. That will now be a right in, right out only. And that would restrict the access. But what we would also do is go ahead and build, if they develop on their own prior to the overall development plan, we would go ahead and add in the full movement access, which is in alignment with the Food Lion access on Virginia Route 30. And that would serve as the full access. And then what I was calling site access number 2 would become the restricted right in, right out access for the Burger King property. That would change. The other big critical issue was the main point of access on US 360 as it relates to the demand, indicating that if we put a full movement access on 360, what would the conditions be as it relates to whether or not traffic signal would be warranted? We've indicated that it would be warranted. A traffic signal would be warranted at that location. That typically triggers a next step in the evaluation of that point of access. It's called an SJR, Signal Justification Report. You do the TIA, typically you do the TIA initially, and then do the SJR after the TIA has been reviewed and approved. VDOT, and the SJR is kind of evolving over time. It's a relatively new process, a new procedure that we do. They've now come back and asked us to include some of those initial analytical elements of the SJR in the TIA, giving them a better understanding of, okay, what are the potential issues with an alternative intersection design? With those, some of there's 21 alternative intersection designs.
The SJR evaluates every one of those as it relates to the standard traffic signal, which is what we're saying is warranted. And as you make a comparison between those operations of the 21 versus the standard, some of those alternatives will come to the top from the analytical process, and then they become candidates of this is an intersection design that could go in for Site Drive 5. We've went through that process. That will be part of the revised TIA. We see one alternative design that looks like it's above all the rest as it relates not only to the standard SJR procedure, but also as it relates to how our site lays out. And ideally, it would not necessarily impact any of the other points of access, the alternative design that we'd be talking about. It's called a partial MUT. That design would allow us to preserve the Site Drive 5 location, the main point of access that we're proposing in its current location. And then a median U-turn designation would occur between Site Drive 5 and Site Drive 6, which is to the east on 360, further away from the signalized intersection at Route 30, because that's the concern, the spacing as it relates to that existing intersection. We are probably not in a position to work out this plan of access without some sort of access management exception, because any main point of access with the traffic that we're expecting is going to need to be signalized at least in some way, whether it's a standard signal or an alternative intersection design. Signal will be part of that. And we will have to work through that as an ongoing process, review process with VDOT. We will work through those issues so that when we get to a point where the study is reviewed and approved, we now have the basis for any access management exception request that we need to make. It will have to be tailored specifically to what the intersection design is. An access management exception for a standard signal is going to look different than an access management exception for an MUT, alternative design. So we're kind of trying to get to that point where we have a good understanding on a preliminary basis, this is going to be the design that VDOT will support. Ideally, and then this is just for me anecdotally as a traffic engineer, most development teams, they want the standard signal come, no matter what. This team is not doing that. We're embracing the fact that their alternative design may be the champion, and that's something we're prepared to go forward with. And that gets back to the point that as we go through this process, we're going to get approval from VDOT one way or another. And the plan will go forward from there. Once the study is reviewed and processed, though, a formal SJR will be submitted that will finalize it, the final design. Access management sections will also be a part of any submittal. I think the one thing that's kind of critical here is the APN designation for 360. That's a relatively new thing. What it does, it heightens the sensitivity of the review for anything that's being proposed along this corridor, especially as it relates to any new crossovers that we're talking about. And what that ultimately means for us is that call is just not at the district level. That's going to go to the central office. And the state traffic engineer will also have to have say in what the final design is because of the APN designation. So that's kind of where all that access is going. But those are the two main concerns. The main point of access on 360 and then the restricted access on Virginia 30. We feel like we've got Virginia 30 wrapped up. We think VDOT's going to be accepting of what we're proposing. There may be some design elements that we need to work out to be sure that they feel like the restricted access is going to function correctly. The bigger issue is the primary access on 360, just from the standpoint of working through the different layers of analysis and understanding in the APN designation. But we're fully prepared to go to alternative intersection design, and I think that's what VDOT's going to want to see. And we think we have one that's going to be a champion, and that's the partial MUT. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. The only other question I had is, I do see where there being a connection to the Parks and Rec area, the Little League, that's right there. Is that, have you all done any analysis on how that might impact the Little League as far as their ability to handle an additional traffic flow through there?
So the traffic study focuses primarily on the AM and the PM peak hour conditions. I think when you're talking Little League and the sports facility, it's more of a weekend condition. So we didn't specifically analyze that condition to understand what that interplay would be. As I sit here, I don't anticipate any issues from that. And VDOT didn't question that in terms of the scoping procedure. When we do these studies, we sit down with VDOT and the county as it relates to the county that's in question. And we ask, what are your concerns? Is there any issues? And that was not one of them that was raised at that point. If there's something that we need to do, I guess we could provide some additional information to answer your question. At this point, though, I don't anticipate any issue with as it relates to the operation of the Little League facility. One thing I also want to point out, I did, Mr. Rainey, you pointed out something. I want to be sure there was one thing I wanted to clarify. The hard corner, the potential for a super convenience mart.
Right.
One of the comments VDOT came back to is they wanted to see a special analytical step done to isolate that and understand what that would mean for an interim condition where the access was unique to that site. We didn't provide that in the study, and now that we've backed off of that plan of access, we're not going to show that in the revised study. But the super convenience mart, the traffic that will be generated by that site is in the study. But we have all of the parcels, all 6 parcels planned from the commercial site and the super convenience mart on top of the retail that we were looking at. So it is in the initial study. Those numbers are in there. But obviously we're going to revise the study and have VDOT take another look at that.
The alternate access design, is that going to work well with the super convenience store?
So the super convenience store really will not benefit directly by the alternative intersection design since it's upstream of the hard corner there. However, because the site itself is going to be accessed through the overall commercial site, they will stand to benefit from that point of access just like the rest of the development will.
The access on 360,
Yes,
is that going to be right in, right out?
for the super convenience store, that is a right-in only
Right in only.
on the 360 point of access.
VDOT has said that could not be a right out.
That is too close to the functional area of the Virginia Route 3360 signal for that type of operation. We can get them in, they don't want us to get them out at that point.
The other major question I have is time frame. What is your best estimate of when you'll have all this completed?
We are at a point where we're ready to submit. We had some final discussions on the revisions just prior to coming in here. And we'll be submitting that shortly, tomorrow, this week for sure. And then VDOT will have a chance to obviously go through the document again. To the extent that they need a great deal of time, I think the good thing here is they've already had a look at it and understand the issues. They've been part of the scoping process. So I know we'll have it submitted relatively short. I don't want to necessarily commit what VDOT's review time will be.
Is your spacing between Route 3360 and that intersection meet the requirements?
It will require an access management exception because it does not.
How long would that, do you anticipate that would take?
That will really be debated through the study, the review of the traffic study. And when VDOT comes back with, let's say VDOT, when the development team and VDOT come to an agreement as it relates to what we're saying in whatever traffic study version we have at the time, let's just say there's more revisions, right? That will then be understood that we're in agreement, being VDOT, that your plan of access, it needs an access management exception, but we're okay with that. So go ahead and formalize that submittal and then we can approve it. If you follow what I'm saying. The study, once the study is reviewed and approved, I think we'll have all of those issues resolved.
Okay. My concern was if VDOT says that's not an acceptable distance
That's
or
right.
whatever, then if you have to move that entrance.
We will certainly have to come up with a solution. However, VDOT comes back and says you can't have left turn access on 360.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm speaking out of turn here relative to the development team. I don't know how commercial development survived under that scenario. But we need to work out a solution with VDOT, and they need to understand that we need access.
Well,
And it may not be perfectly suited for their standard.
I mean, if you all can work that out, that's fine with me, but I just want to make sure
Absolutely.
that we have that the plan we're looking at is going to be a good
Yeah.
plan. The other concern I had that I pointed out was the traffic on the internal streets. You all have not provided that.
We have it, but we can easily provide that information
Okay,
for
we
VDOT.
will need that to know the.
It's there, it's in the study, it just needs to be projected into the site.
But they've only showed one, design. What am I trying to say? Cross-section design.
That's fair. And as we get into this process, Mr. Ryder, I'm sure we will understand how these roads need to be designed internal to the site. To the extent that traffic volumes are part of that, part of that evaluation, we will provide that information.
We also need to know, well, for instance, the cul-de-sac streets, they're all less than 400 vehicles per day. I'm pretty certain. That's going to be a different design. And while I'm on that subject, it was said in here that, as shown in the typical section, that sidewalk would not be required on those minor streets. And our subdivision ordinance requires sidewalk on both sides and around the cul-de-sacs. So for the designers' information, that's going to have to be there.
We will certainly take that comment tomorrow and do what we
other
necessarily
major
do.
issue I have with the street design. We don't want, particularly on the higher volume streets, we don't want on-street parking. So something needs to be worked out, and I'm just wondering if you all had considered alleyways for parking. And
I would have to turn that question over to the civil.
well, I thought you would, but that's the kind of thing we need some answers on, and that's the reason I raised these questions.
Sure. I don't know if there's any more traffic questions.
I do actually have a big one.
Go for it.
The vehicular access to the ballpark. Basically accesses the lower gravel parking lot of the ballpark. So potentially every vehicle coming out of this subdivision could cut through, hit the gravel parking lot, and go out through the ball field entrance, which is already a very poor, narrow road. How has VDOT addressed that? Because I mean, that could potentially somebody coming home down 30, let me cut up through the ball field and cut into the backside of the neighborhood, and it would be asphalt for a short distance, then turn into gravel where that entrance dumps into that back parking lot.
Do we have a plan that we can look at as we're questioning and talking about this? I don't know if there's something we can pull up on the figure of yours. We can kind of talk through it a little bit.
I have a question. I'm confused. Is this a site plan approval? I mean, because these are questions that come up when you do a site plan. I mean, we're here trying to get this approved. We're looking at what in my opinion, from going through the ordinance, I'm going through all the sections referenced by the ordinance. I'm sorry. Somehow I don't speak out loud enough, but okay. When I look at all the sections of the ordinance this refers to, it refers to the master plan being the same or being translated as the subdivision, preliminary subdivision plat, I think is the language. Okay, when we go to the preliminary subdivision plat, when you go through the ordinance, that refers you back to the site plan, preliminary site plan. So what we should be looking at this point. What I want to make sure I understand is preliminary, right? Yes, yes, absolutely. Approving a preliminary. this thing could change. I mean, if VDOT comes in and changes this or changes that, or when they actually go to do the site plan, this whole thing can change. All right, so you're asking questions and we don't even have, to me, I guess I am confused. We are looking to get this, zone, not site plan approval. These are the questions, like you're asking the questions, the size of the house and this and that, the water pressure. They're not gonna give us permission unless we have water pressure. There are certain zoning things that we have to go on the land. So what we don't wanna do is put this decision on because of site plan question, not because of zoning question. All right, and that's why, and every word that you said is preliminary, preliminary, preliminary. So we're not gonna have a site plan until we get zoning approval. All right, I mean, it's as simple as that. We need zoning approval. What we can't afford to do is have this turn on, to postpone it. We're hoping you have a decision today, whether it's for or whether it's not. What we don't want is postpone it. All right, and again, these are questions that come up on a site plan approval. And then you guys have enough authority, a position that stops it from moving to the next step. I mean, that's what we're asking for, zoning approval, not site plan approval. And I think some of these questions are confusing to me. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I'm asking the question,
I'd like to address one thing. This is a public comment tonight was. So questions like square footage were some of the public's comments that I think they'd like some.
Right.
So this is their one opportunity, if we were to approve this tonight,
Right.
to have public comments.
Right.
So the questions we've asked are all valid questions from the public. Because tonight is the public comment period.
Right.
So we understand it would be great to get approval tonight, move forward, move on. But we do have a responsibility to our constituents to ask these questions during the public comment period.
Right, I appreciate that, but I also think that you need to go back and tell them that, yes, we ask the questions, but it's more important that they go at the zoning meeting and ask these questions. That's what's gonna let be, me- where the answer, that's all I'm saying. Again, I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying that that's where these questions are gonna be answered, you know what I mean? Or stop, if they don't want a big house or a small house or anything else on that lot, then they can appeal to the zoning and say, hey, or the people that are gonna approve that particular site plan and say that. As I pointed out to begin with when I spoke, nobody wants to see this move any faster than we do. But we don't want it to move until we understand it. And section 86-345 clearly says that the part of the rezoning requirement is a master plan. You haven't answered the questions in the master plan as required by the master plan and the site plan. Now, if I'm wrong, certainly.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, just to kind of back up some of those comments, I think there is some confusion with, interpretation. For example, we have been told multiple times by the staff that we have met the requirements for the PUD application. So if we've been misdirected, then, again, I'm just saying what we've been told. We submitted a TIA, which is a requirement. It's not a requirement to have all resolution for VDOT. That might not come until the site plan approval process. We develop a lot. A lot of times VDOT is the last piece of the puzzle for site plan application. So again, I think hopefully what we're here today, again, is to seek the zoning approval. Stuff such as the APN designation on 360, we would hope would give you comfort that the entire VDOT organization is looking at this project. If they can't get it right, they're the professionals. So, I think hopefully that will give you some comfort. I believe we're also using the highest and best traffic use, such as a big box user, which is a pipe dream at this point. The reality is it could be significantly less traffic, which would only benefit, I would assume, the county from a traffic standpoint specifically. Addressing some of the questions that were brought up about the access for the park. one of the main reasons that was put in was because, again, it was a consistent theme that we heard. We want access there. I can't speak so much to the technical side of it, but what I will say is the thought process behind it was, assuming the project goes forward, then there's going to be a significant increase in the amount of homes, and it would keep the traffic potentially for ballpark days off of the main thoroughfares of 360 and 30. Which again, we would think would be an advantage. Not only that, it would allow children, families, whoever wants to ride or just walk. They don't even have to use a vehicle. Again, with the Airbnb case earlier, who can police a car from cutting through and going through the park? Nobody can police that, you know, but I certainly don't think that's the intent. And shifting it further back, in my opinion, I agree that entrance exit to the ballpark is scary. It would almost discourage people from using that as a pass through because it's so far into the park. You know, it's not the easiest park to navigate, if we're being honest. You know, the housing square footages, I think we do reference in the application process, the guidelines that have specific parameters. So although they're not specifically called out, because again, we don't even have a builder designated yet, we do narrow it down to what we interpret as the right window for the application process. Commercial, we've already addressed that, very similar response. I would like to address the fire comment as well for the 3-story. Again, to our knowledge, there's nothing in the code or anywhere that requires a ladder truck for 3-story. As you mentioned, that there's already 3-story buildings in the county. There's 3-story buildings all over the country. Okay, certainly in small counties that don't have ladder trucks. But what I wanted to point out is the building code requires sprinkler systems. So 3-story buildings would have sprinkler systems, which is an added protection. And we would certainly, but again, that's not even in the site plan approval process. That's in your building plans. Okay. So some of these questions, I think we just want to make sure that we're here addressing what is supposed to be addressed for tonight. And some of these things are code driven. Some of them are site plan guideline driven. And we want to focus on what is specific to a rezoning application for the PUD. The commercial tract, I know that was brought up with flexibility. I'm happy to go on record to say, I think that the intent, the community needs commercial. This intersection is prime for commercial. It's everything that the package for the future planning talks about, okay? My point is, we put flex in there with the intent that after an extended period of time, if commercial is just not coming to Central Garage, that we need to have some flexibility as a smart business person with a significant development in the county. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, you know, I don't want everybody to focus on increased apartments. I think we have the ability to put single family and townhouses there as well. Is that right? So in that flex tract over there by the apartments, the multifamily tract, if that were to encroach eventually, and again, that is not our intent. The commercial would be a much better fit for us. It would be a much better fit for the county. We did cap it at the 300 apartments for that reason, but there would be other residential possibilities that could go there. And I'm just trying to cover some of the notes that I heard from the comments. Let's see. Yeah, I think, you know, just for one little comment here and I'll step away from the mic for now, is we are a local development team. I say local from the Richmond region. I personally live in Richmond. My father lives in Williamsburg. We've had a presence in the county for over 20 years from a business standpoint. Balzer and Associates is located, I don't know if it's technically Powhatan or Chesterfield, but right on the border out there. Balzer is a renowned site civil engineering firm. I mean, to some of the comments that are coming about the intricacies inside the site plan, which we would attribute to a site plan application process, this is what they do all day long. So they're certainly familiar with it. We're not going to cut any corners. We're not going to take advantage of the system. We can't. That's what the site plan application process is for. So I only say that to say, I'm happy to continue conversations and everything throughout the site plan application process. We're very easy to work with. We're a small family business. I say we're local. We have business in the county and have for years. My cell phone, my door is open. We don't plan to just, you know, we're not an international or national firm that's coming in to try to just, you know, cash a check, so to speak. So I just want to give you guys some comfort. We're here every day. I am personally in the county at least once a week, visiting our location in Central Garage. And of course, we'll be here much more if this gets approved. We can continue to answer questions if you have them.
I have one question for Ms. Miller. In one of your responses to Ms. Graham, you mentioned something about the 100-foot building height, and that building height is in our code. However, as has been pointed out by Mr. Kellum, we don't have the ability to fight fires. We could not approve something of that height unless you all can show us that you have facilities for fire suppression. Some design for fire suppression. I think that's something we need to discuss.
Yeah, and I
And
think,
on that note, please understand, we want a hotel here in the county. We hope we can get a hotel. But what I would suggest, if you're looking at a hotel, look at something like a small hotel, 30, 40 rooms, something like that, maybe 3, 4 stories. But we would more than welcome that. And we're looking for that. We need that. So if that's in your plans, we would hope that can come to the fruition.
and I think that's the reason we put that in there, because we have heard that there is a desire to have a hotel. And so we wanted to make sure that was part of this plan, or an allowable use. So if that does come across, that they could provide that in this location. We understand the concern with the height, and I think we can work with the 45 feet. We just did bring up the 100 feet since that is allowed in the B2 district right now. We limited to hotel or an office building, and that if that was so desired in this area as well. But I think John will reiterate that we are more than willing to work within the parameters of the height. And if a hotel or something does come along that is higher than 45 feet, we're happy to work with you all and come up with the fire suppression, if that's needed within the building or outside, or connection with the other local fire stations in the area that could help if emergency. So we understand where that comment was coming from, but we were trying to respond to the need for a hotel or the want in this area.
But what I want to say at this point, unless any of y'all have any more questions, it's going to be my recommendation to the planning commission that we table this until we can meet with staff and discuss some of these issues. This is our first opportunity to meet them. I met with you all one time, but this is our first opportunity to really look at the design of the facility and how it is. What questions have we answered? Have we not answered?
Let's not, excuse me, order. We're getting all the way off into the weeds here now. Ms. Graham, this is just a conditional use permit application. Do we have to have all this stuff? You said that everything, the method requirements for your CUP, we still have many other steps that we can stop that what's going to happen to be developed. Does this have to all be done now to get a CUP?
We're looking at this for a rezoning case
Right.
to
So
rezone.
that's all this
it
is.
to Land
Like,
unit development.
we're just looking, he said everybody's going off into all these tangents.
They do have.
They have to do a
submit-
lot more stuff.
Yeah, they will have to submit a site plan before they get further into the process. For permits.
Right,
and
that's
so
what I'm saying. I
forth.
mean, this is brought to the board. This is just a conditional use permit. This is just the beginning. Do we have to have all these things answered that Mr. Wagner was asking about, specific items about? I mean, were those that you said they met all the requirements? Why are we being told now that we weren't?
We cannot approve a site plan until VDOT signs it.
Right, and that doesn't have anything to do with the CUP, does it?
But this is a rezoning, but
Not the CI.
I'm sorry, but this is.
That's all I'm saying. This is just the beginning step. and It doesn't,
44
it's not,
says this is a conditional use. So it's both, but I don't want to get in a whole lot of argument now, but
right.
but I do think,
We need to move on.
Mr. Chairman,
Right.
I do think that we as a planning commission, in order to have a better understanding of what's going on here, we haven't had much of an opportunity. I do think we need to table this. And if necessary, I would certainly like to meet with all of us to discuss this further. But I think we have to have a better understanding of exactly what's going on.
As we said, we get the answers later on down the road, all right? This is not the point for us to spend all our money and effort, because if we can't get approval, we can't afford to spend more money to go on to keep answering these questions. It's one step at a time. You're asking us to be on third base, and we're just trying to get on first base. We can't get to
I'm
third
sorry,
base.
I didn't get your name, but with all due, with all due respect to you and Mr. Balzer, we just want to get this right. We as a planning commission have to recommend something. We want to be sure that what we recommend, we don't get another shot at this. So we want to be sure we're right, and we need to talk to staff about where we are and what steps are going to be taken in the future. So when we recommend this to the board, we want to be in a better position than what we are today.
I think we're obviously here hopeful, seeking for approval this evening. We have spent numerous hours working not only with staff on multiple occasions, but with many of you, as well as planning commission members. So I don't necessarily agree with this is the first time you're seeing it recently. You, Mr. Wagner, have had 90% of this information for at least 2.5 months now. So, and a lot of the concerns have been consistent since day one from you, and we respect that. I think my ask would be for seeking for approval, of course. If you are headed to a direction of tabling, I think we deserve the right to understand the specific table items, because there's a lot of discussion going on tonight. A lot of it. I could talk all night. We could argue all night, talk however you want to phrase it. But we need specific details, because again, it's going to come down to interpretation, and I don't want to postpone something just for us to talk after the meeting and find out that a TIA has to be submitted and that's the only requirement. That's my interpretation. That was done months ago. And again, VDOT may not approve it until they may be the last piece of the site plan application. So I don't know what your expectation is. That might be a year from now. Are we going to wait that long?
All I have suggested we do is table this and give the planning commission an opportunity to sit down with staff and go over this, get their interpretation of what I've talked about tonight. And if well, they're right, we would approve this at our next meeting.
And I guess my question would be, have you not sat with staff previously?
Have we not one?
Sat with staff previously?
Not to the extent of a full review.
Well, why not? You knew this was coming up. I think.
That's try to, I mean, we were going on the advice of our Ms.
Mr. Chair,
Graham. Should we? Yes,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, we've not had the public comment.
no,
No, we
that's
haven't.
right, that either, yeah,
Okay.
right, we need to move on, like I said earlier, but I guess none of us have, because let's go ahead and open the public comment to see if the public has additional items. Right now, we'll open public hearing for ZO 2-22 MHF Properties LLC. Anybody wishing to speak, have 3 minutes opportunity. Please state your name and your address. Doesn't look like there's gonna be. Is anybody online? Oh, yes, we have. Are these two that signed up?
Not to
Oh, not to
speak, they
speak.
just called with questions,
Oh, okay, so. We'll just
not
talk
in
about that.
favor or in
Oh,
opposition.
okay.
They just called with questions.
Does anybody in the audience have any comments, questions, any more? No, seeing none. Online, there's none.
There's not
Oh.
any online this time.
Okay, thank you. I'll close the public hearing. Now, I guess we just need to decide. I mean, I don't understand. Like I said, I didn't understand when Ms. Graham told us at the last meeting, they met all the requirements, and then all of a sudden we got all this stuff like that. What is the minimum requirement for a CB? Do we have to have all this stuff now?
They have submitted everything. There are some things that VDOT wants to see before they will finalize their approval.
Right, but does that have
which
anything
is
to
what
do
they're
with the
working on.
CUP, just authorizing to get a conditional use permit? We still have to do other approvals later.
Yeah, there are a couple things, but there's really, it's, at this point, it's hard for them to submit those items that I went through earlier.
Is that some of the things that the applicant was saying that they're working with? The traffic engineer said he was talking with VDOT.
Well, I mean, like a couple of things with the square footage of the commercial building. I just noted it will be submitted with the site plan prior to review and approval
And these are your recommendations for the approval of the CUP.
Well, this is what I saw missing from the master plan.
Okay.
And until they get locked in with, commercial, businesses, it's gonna be hard to submit that information. Same thing, general location of water, sewer, permanent ENS and stormwater structures. They would submit that during the final site plan review and approvals.
Right. It's not needed now.
You know, that would all go to DEQ for approval for stormwater and, our ENS is done by our consultant. Phasing schedule was another thing that was missing from the design manual. He noted in there that it would be determined yearly. They have noticed that this is a 10-year build out project. So like they said, it's hard for them to say, I'm gonna have this many done in 1 year, this many done in another year, because it's gonna be based on what the market needs are. The other thing missing from the community impact, statement, the stormwater management plan, they will need to submit that. And it would have to go to DEQ for approval prior to us signing off or approving any site plan. Under the general standards of development, they more than exceed the minimum district size and density that's required. Streets, the developers proposing streets to be private. There is an issue with the cul-de-sac size. They would not be able to do a 3-point turn with fire truck or a bus.
Sorry, can I interrupt about the private streets? I'm not
Uh-huh.
sure where that came from.
I read it in one of your.
I think some of the commercial areas, we said those could be private, kind of alleyways, like the commercial access behind the out parcels. But everything serving like the main development and the subdivision will be taken in the state system, which we have put in our report. So all of those are going to be
All the
public.
streets in the subdivision,
Correct, will be
Right.
public. Mhm.
residential.
Yeah.
But you've got 30-foot street.
Where was that? Sorry.
That was on the master, plan.
I mean, I think we have 30 feet edge of pavement to edge of pavement, but
And then you have-
47 or more right of way.
You have 47 with the, curb and gutter,
Correct.
and then you show a 5-foot, sidewalk.
Mhm. So that's a typical VDOT section that we took from their manual, that if you build it to that standard, it'll be taken to the state system.
Mr. Wagner, you made a formal motion or you just?
I've got one,
Oh,
I got a comment,
I was
if that's
just
okay.
Set you up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to marinate on everything and digest this, and I really appreciate your comments about the commercial side, because for me personally, that I think is the most important part of this. And if certain amount of residential gets us to that point, I think that fulfills fulfills what y'all are trying to do and fulfills what some of what we're trying to do as a county as well. So for me, the questions that I asked pertain to me trying to figure out what is the potential for this to go from the current ratio of commercial to residential to something like 90% residential and 10% commercial. So, and just to put this in, perspective, and this is using the numbers from y'all's plan here. It's roughly 7,500 households in the county. School enrollment 1,984. If we use that same ratio and apply it to what's currently proposed here, we're looking at an additional roughly 160 or so students into our school system. It's additional cost on the county. And that's based on a ratio of 0.26 students per household. These types of houses could very well be the type that are 4-person families with 2 students or more. That ratio could be pushed up to 0.5, 0.75, 1 or higher. That the national average, I think, is 1.9 or something close to that. So if we were to take higher ratios, then we're talking about a huge burden on our education system and on our county on our county finances as well, especially if commercial drags behind. That's where my concern is. And so when I look at this and I see the flex tracks and so forth, the range of commercial track day from 15 to 33 acres, that's where my concerns are personally. I don't know if others share the same sentiment, but for me, we need commercial. Obviously, we need rooftops as well to support that commercial. I just don't want to see it get out of balance.
Yeah, we understand that completely. And I tried to portray that before. It's almost like a last resort case. It would be the very final phase if the housing market is just going gangbusters and the commercial market is a dark market. Okay. And to answer your question about percentages, I think on the worst case commercial scenario, it's 15% of the acreage. On a best case scenario, I believe it's 30. And don't quote me exactly, but that's from memory. You know, the numbers that you're throwing out for the school system seem accurate from what I remember. But again, this is a 10-year build out minimum. I mean, the reality is it's a 10-year minimum build out. So from the information that we received from I believe the superintendent or somebody from the school board, we hear a lot about the school capacity and everything. But again, over a 10 to 12-year time frame, a lot can happen there, number one. Number two, the numbers that we got directly from the school system are drastically under capacity, okay, drastically under. And the additional of the grades, I think that we put some sort of projection, you know, spreading out between the elementary, middle, and high school. You know, the impact, I don't think there's a single area that would get more than 50 kids, again, over a 10-year period, okay? And they're all assumptions, of course, to a point. But hopefully that, you know, addresses some of the concerns. But, you know, we do have a vested interest in getting commercial off the ground here. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But I think the reality is we also have to rely on professionals. I would consider myself a professional developer. I have commercial businesses, branded commercial businesses. I'm a landlord for commercial aid tenants such as Starbucks, Verizon, you know, these different types of businesses that we already have relationships with, okay? They need rooftops. And I was on a meeting, I think you all were on a meeting a couple months ago with RKG when they did a presentation. The highest and best use of the county is rooftops, okay? I think he even specifically stated that there's no capacity here for a pharmacy and certainly not for a Walmart. He put a little demonstration together to talk about that. We're here to blend the two. And honestly, from my seat, I kind of almost feel like we're proffering commercial to a point, even though that's honestly not how I look at it. But I would hope the county kind of analyzes it that way. Because with the R1 designation today, I don't know what the numbers are, but could we by right just go build 300 homes and you know, by right? So I think that's something to consider. Again, we want commercial. Our business is commercial. That's my family business. That's what we do. You know, and we've got a heck of a team together here, all professionals. You know, again, this is not something that we want to see fail. Our name is going to be stamped on it. Balzer's name is going to be stamped on it. Whoever builds a home, their name is going to be stamped on it. And we want to be a part of the community, and we plan to be.
Ms. Graham, at a later time, if the conditional use permit just went through, it still doesn't have to set these, or do we put conditions now? Like I say, let's say we have a concern that we don't want the apartments. Can we say now that we don't want this amount of points? We don't want these flex track A and B to turn into, but like I said, is that they're basing it on market analysis, but can we state, does that have to be stated for the conditional use permit, or can that be done at a later date?
I would state if you have a limit on the apartments, that it's with the approval of.
Well, maybe we could do something. Well, I know there might be a motion on the floor already, but anyway, that's something I could say we could say if you want to put a lot of strong stipulations on it, but that's just. Right.
Don't misunderstand me,
Right,
anybody.
right.
I'm not looking to put a lot of strong stipulations.
Okay.
But as I said, I'm ready to move it forward, but I still think there's some unanswered questions, and this is not between you all, but we haven't been involved with you all that much. This is between us and staff. And that's the reason I want to table it. Let us sit down and have a good discussion.
Well, and I think
I understand your concern, but I think we need to become comfortable as well.
Well, I was gonna say, I think my concern is some of the questions that are being asked, I think we would come back next time without an answer. Because some of the questions being asked are impossible to answer at this stage of the game. I mean, that's just the reality of development. Some of them are very, very specific. One other thing I do want to touch on is from a county desire. Again, each of you, I have been on these meetings the past couple of months, listening to you guys talk, engaging. I'm invested already in the community for 20 years. Utility infrastructure was a big thing. We're bringing natural gas to this project, which is miles down the road. I heard you guys mention that that is a priority to bring it up 360. So barring any unforeseen circumstances, we have gotten verbal approval from the company who handles Virginia Natural Gas to bring it up here. They're not going to bring it for the commercial. It was to my surprise. They're bringing it with a residential commitment of a minimum of 455 homes, I believe, excluding the apartments. Okay. We have to guarantee HVAC hookup and we have to guarantee hot water hookup. Okay. So, you know, it's not going to happen if we don't get that portion. It's a marriage between the residential and commercial, which we feel like we're doing. The other piece is broadband. We've already talked to broadband. I know it's in the general vicinity, but it would just branch through this whole project. Reach back to some of the neighbors that Mr. Kellum had talked about on the rear of the project. And you know, again, the other thing is HRSD. There is a capacity issue on the horizon for HRSD. We would trigger this. We are in the service district or whatever they call it. They are forced to supply to this area, which they're not just going to upgrade for us. They would upgrade for the future. So again, we can't check every single box. That's impossible. But I honestly think we have checked 95% of the boxes on the list.
Mr. Chair, if I may share
Yes, ma'am.
from some experience.
Yes, ma'am.
So my main function in Gloucester was to deal with developers, mom and pop organizations, to deal with them through the site plan process. And that was because I had the experience of being a permit manager and dealing with the building world, the zoning world. And I think, you know, I didn't deal with the planning side with the rezonings, but the rezoning applications went through before the preliminary site plan process and before the site plan process. They came to me after they had gone through that particular process. And that was because, as the applicant said, they didn't want them to put them through that cost. They wanted to see if they were approved for the rezoning first. They had the conceptual plan. They did go through VDOT initially if they needed to work through the TIA as a continual process, and they did that through the site plan process. I did reach out to VDOT through Mr. Brooks, and they do have some of these items that you saw on the November 18th letter. They did provide them some pretty high numbers when they did that TIA. They can continue to work with VDOT through that TIA and through the site plan process, because some of that information can change. So this isn't something that can stop as of today. As they mentioned, and they are correct, some of the information that you're requesting is during the preliminary site plan process that is outside of the rezoning application. So I do want to clarify that, having actually been in that seat. So I just want to clarify that to the planning commission.
Thank you. That's what I thought. But we already have I think, a motion on the
Well,
floor.
question for you. If we were to approve this tonight and move forward, what portion of this would come back to the planning commission, or at that point, would it all go to the board?
Just this part will go to the board, because this is just the CUP.
This would go to the
Right.
board next.
Right. And they would have to come to us with the next phase.
Which each phase of it?
Yes, and then we can put stipulations. No, we can't have this many. We can't have this many. No, VDOT said you need to do this. I mean, I don't know. but-
Right, and if
We-
they
we
changed any,
We already. Sorry.
if they changed any part of the
We-
master plan, Mr. Chair, they would have to come back through the whole process to
Right.
change that master plan.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. I've been through a lot of this process too.
We know.
But
We know.
and a couple of developers that are consultants as well, but, now my reading of the ordinance is different from what you all are telling me now. And that's what I just want to be sure before we say yes or no. And I have no intention of saying no, but I just want to be sure that with the planning staff that we are on the right track. And I think that needs some discussion. And I think we can do that pretty quickly. We don't, Mr. DeParlo, we certainly don't want to hold this up.
I don't think we should suffer because, as John said, we're not going to have the answers months from now or whatever for the questions you have. You have plenty of opportunity in the future. All right, and.
Yeah, Mr. Navarro, right, we understand. Yeah, order, please. We have to move on, but Mr. Wagner has a motion.
I would love a vote.
We are gonna vote, right, so,
Okay.
but, and it's probably not gonna be favorable.
I'm gonna go here and,
Right,
but you know the procedure.
Exactly,
So I'm
You made it.
recommending table. Table doesn't need a second,
right,
doesn't need a vote.
but we can.
But you can,
Right.
you can introduce a motion to go ahead.
I would like to introduce a motion because I'd like to see what the rest of the board thinks. I mean, everybody else wants to do that too, because we are planning a special meeting, special board meeting. I think that's what Mr. Wagner says. We're gonna get this done quickly. All we need to do is discuss it with staff and the administrator and the deputy administrator, and try to come up with clarifications for all. And then I think, but it's, well, I mean, is that true, Jerry? I mean, if you, can one person table it? I thought it had to be voted on. One-
We vote on it.
Yeah, you can't, one person can't just table it.
Sorry, it's not.
Right, okay. No,
If you all
that's-
wanna
I don't
vote
think
on
it's,
it,
I think
if y'all
that's
wanna vote on it, that's-
misread too, but that's, I'm thinking, pretty sure it's gonna be tabled to our special meeting, but
So we
Mr.
can
Wagner,
close the public hearing and then.
right, I think I already did. Yeah, it's already closed the public hearing. That's why we came back up with discussion, trying to figure out. So Mr. Wagner's wants to table. He says we don't need a motion, but I think we do. But we have a motion. Do we have a second to table? Yeah. See, we don't have a second, so that's what's bad about not having legal representation here. I think. Can you look up in our bylaws and see if it states that? Because I don't think it states that one person can table an item.
I'm pretty sure you need.
I don't think so either. The item was asked to be tabled and it wasn't second. Right, I think so too. Huh? Yeah, yeah.
If
So
you have
it's-
to second
right.
it and vote on it.
Okay, and there was
So-
no, there's no second, so the motion drops.
So can we make another motion?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna make a motion. Based on what Ms. Graham just said, we're gonna have other opportunities to go through this thing. I'm gonna make a motion to approve tonight. And then at our next workshop meeting, we can go through all the details and things we've talked about. But I mean, you guys know what the questions are gonna be. And they're coming. You know, again, the square footage is a big one for me. The apartments are a big one for me. The legal aspect that we've got to get answer to is a big one for me. You know, again, I go back to tonight was a public comment period, and those are the comments that have been brought forward and they needed to be addressed tonight. But I also agree with you. This is just for the CUP. Let's get past this step and then we move on. So that's my motion.
We have a new motion. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion made and properly seconded to do that, and this is gonna be brought up at our special work sessions, which we haven't decided the date, but that will be, it probably won't be before the Board of Supervisors work session, but it will be right after, and it will be before our main meeting, so hopefully we'll get a clarification on that, but any more discussion?
Well, I guess I would just say, I mean, you made the comment, you know, a month from now, you're not going to have any more information. But I mean, again, you know, the information we're going to be looking for at the next phase and kind of what some of the high points are. So again, I'm like Mr. Wagner said, I think we all are favorable with this. This is a huge deal for this county, unlike nothing we've ever seen before. And most of us up here, you know, have 20+ years vested in this county, and good Lord willing, we'll have 30, 40 more invested here. So we're just cautiously moving forward.
Understood.
There's a motion made, probably second. Ms. Trimmer, could you call roll, please?
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Ms. Powell?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Chairman Greenwood?
Aye. Okay, CUP passes for recommendation to move to the Board of Supervisors, and we will discuss this at our special meeting, which we haven't decided yet, but maybe we can set that tonight as well later on. Thank you all for all the discussion. Sorry it was so heated, but that's, as we've said, we have multiple people here with different talents and. All right. Next item we have old business, but looks like we don't have any old business, do we, Ms. Graham?
The only thing is if we want to decide on a work session date,
I would think we probably should. I think, did everybody agree on the 12th? I didn't send it with you. Did everybody say the 12th looked all right? 'Cause it looked
12th was
like the
okay
12th
for me.
Is a Thursday.
Well,
Is that
it's okay with
okay?
me.
It's okay with
12th?
me. Yeah, so 12th at 7. So we'll meet for the 12th for a work
So-
session, and this will be one of the main things. Plus the other thing we discussed earlier.
the main items we want to go over at the work session.
We probably need
PUD,
to have a list
Right.
for the work session or
Right.
we'll never get through it.
the
Could you
PUD.
come up with an agenda?
Yeah. Certainly.
Is that the only thing on old business? I didn't
There's a
see
couple of ordinance things I know that we've
There
been touching
was, there
on.
was some wording. We can put that in there if we have time to do it.
At the work session?
We
That
will. If
sounds
not,
good.
we'll carry it
Move
over
it
to
to
the next one.
okay, that sounds good since it's getting late. And. Okay, so then we'll move to new business. What is anything under new business?
Don't have a lot of new business. I do have 2 public hearings that may be coming at your February 7th meeting. One is for 180 apartment units and a clubhouse and a pool on King William Road. That's up in the Central Crossing, Central Crossing area. The other one is Macaulay Park. Sheldon Place, right off of Sheldon Place. That is 64 senior carriage house
Oh,
units.
that would be nice.
You may see those at your next meeting.
That's gonna be for reason.
That will be for rezoning and a CUP.
That's just for discussion. This in the original plan from Macaulay Park was commercial. The last time we approached that and talked to Macaulay Park people about that, they said they were gonna go ahead with commercial, they were gonna sell it for commercial. But they had not agreed to really any timeline or anything. Now we're talking about going to residential.
The back portion of the lot was actually for industrial and the front part was B2.
That was B2, yes. Can we consider discussing with them, talking about instead of going to residential, to go to a business park or something of that nature with some shops in there that would serve that in Central Crossing and in other words, hold them to commercial.
I think part of that deal was trading the Kennington library spot for putting a library at Macaulay Park that they felt would better serve this project if it went through Central Crossing, Macaulay Park, it would serve a lot more.
Yeah, and I think their Kennington is gonna.
Not speaking for or against, I'm just saying that was part of the land swap. But
Was that several years ago?
no,
Yeah,
that has just
recent.
come up in the last few months that they offered to swap the Kennington piece that was set aside.
It's been since we were finishing up the comprehensive plan.
I will try to get that stuff to you as early as possible. So y'all have them.
Yeah, I think we need to have a lot of discussion on that.
That's like that other subdivision that came back to us and said they were gonna do the homes, and they turned up townhomes and across from the $400,000 homes. And yeah. Okay, any other new business?
That is it for now.
And Then I guess number 10, we have staff and special committee reports, and admin's reports by Ms. Grover. Another big stack. Thank you.
Can we read them when we get home?
Nighttime reading.
Yeah, that's good reading.
Nighttime.
We'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
I second that.
That's it. Okay. I guess the violation logs, everything's in here. This is all the same stuff.
So it is November's and December's, instead of sending them separate, we just put them together. The violation log, we're gonna send that. Andy was double checking a couple things today. And so as soon as he was done checking that, I'm gonna go ahead and email that. So you have all of the planning, the zoning and the building for November and December. So you can take a look and see if you have any questions and let me know.
All right.
In answer to the question that you all had just a moment ago, so if one member decides to table, it can be overturned by another motion and a vote for the majority of the planning commission, which is what you all did.
Yeah, right. Okay. And are you also with the information and training for the Virginia Conflict of Interest, or is that?
That is sharing.
That's-
Yeah, this is something that we're given to all of our boards and commissions. However, if y'all would like some training or anything on it, we can get our county attorney or one of his associates to speak on some training.
We'll just let you know.
Just let us know if
Send- share
that's
it.
something that you're interested in, and we'll set it up.
Could that possibly be their workshop or is that too much at one time?
Oh, this coming? Ooh,
Too much?
I
Okay,
don't think so. Don't you think?
I got your answer loud and clear.
Yeah, maybe too
Fair
much. And it looks like now we have commissioner comments, since, again, let's just start in order with one, we don't have one, we've got two. Yeah, and we have three, so I guess. We'll start with Daryl.
Comments?
Yeah, just, it says commissioner comments, yeah.
Just short and sweet. The minutes from last time were wonderful. The presentation tonight was wonderful. I came into this thing and I told Mr. Wagner beforehand, I think this thing probably should have been pushed back another month, but again, learning that it was just phase one and we're gonna have several other opportunities to really grill these guys. That made me feel a little better, so. That's about all I have to say.
Do we have that opportunity?
We do, we don't sign or approve
Yeah.
anything, and Mr. Cullum can attest to this until we have VDOT signature on the plan. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a delay, but we need their blessing as well as other agencies. We won't be able to sign off on anything till we have DEQ approval.
But it will come back to the planning commission on different phases. So we'll have an opportunity to,
To review the site plan.
because the square footage just scares me.
She may, or they may answer that before then. so.
Yeah, but they weren't real forthcoming with
They
it
weren't,
tonight.
yeah.
So
And some of it they may have by the time they get to the Board of Supervisors meeting, but
Okay. Yeah, so let's go, Mr. Suter.
Yeah, excellent job on the minutes for the last two meetings. I did talk to Ms. Height today, and she sounded like she was really sick. And she does send her best. She told me to tell each of y'all that she is sad that she couldn't make it. I told her to rest up because the real work is ahead of us, either whichever way tonight was gonna go. So, yeah, I was apprehensive about moving forward with the PUD tonight and thought in my mind that I wanted, that we probably would be tabling it. I think we made the right decision though, because I don't think it's in our best interest to discourage Balzer or do anything that's gonna make them just throw their hands up. And I think they understand where our concerns are now. I think we've made those very evident. The VDOT issues that Mr. Wagner brought up, the square footages, the phasing, the commercial tracks, all that is very important to that, to how that development is going to impact our county. And it's going to impact our county, not just in tax revenues or expenditures. It's going to be, it's going to permeate throughout everybody, anybody who traverses that area, anybody who goes to Mechanicsville for all their, all their grocery lists and so forth. It has tremendous potential for the county. And I think we did the right thing by letting them know our concerns, but also moving a step forward as well. I think if we had not done that, I think that they would have been really frustrated. And I don't think we need that. That's all I've got.
Mr.
I have
Wagner,
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Mr. Wagner hadn't gone yet.
Question?
Well, just, he made the comment, by right, he could do 300 houses.
It's currently zoned R1. I don't know what the,
Right, but we have some say so about square footages.
well, not for single family residential, but any apartments or anything like that, but
Townhouses.
he would have to go through the CUP process,
Not a single family,
not single family.
so they could have.
So
But
we
the by
don't,
right for townhouses or carriage homes or apartments, they all have to go through a CUP process.
so we don't have anything in our major subdivision ordinance where we can control the square footages.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
That's a slippery slope.
That was part of the argument.
I mean, they have,
They were supposed to show the building height, width and depth. So, whatever building type of residential version they're proposing.
will be in
They-
small
yeah.
lots. They're gonna be limited.
We'll get into the workshop. Sorry, I brought
We
that
can
up.
still stop.
I know everybody's ready to go.
We can still shrink it.
Yeah.
Mr. Wagner, comments?
Well, I'll have to say I'm not,
I know,
not
please,
satisfied.
I know.
And
I was
I'm
gonna
sorry
table it.
thought that I was bringing up too much.
No,
No, I was
I
not.
didn't think so.
These are issues that need to be resolved,
Exactly,
whether they need to be resolved now.
exactly, or later, right, it will be, yeah, it'll still be, right,
And
exactly,
I
I appreciate it.
I spent 53 years.
I know. Yeah.
30 years
The
with
wealth
VDOT,
of knowledge.
12 with consultants,
Yep.
dealing with issues like this.
Mhm.
It's been my purpose to always be thorough
Okay,
and make sure we understand what's going on.
thank
And that was what my position was tonight.
you. Okay.
When I read the ordinance, I read it differently. When it said master plan shall be ready for public hearing, the master plan really that we got was just a
Yeah.
rehash of the concept. It wasn't the master plan. So that's where I had problems, but I look forward to discussing that with everybody and I certainly agree that moving on is going to be helpful, but I just want to make sure that we move on, that we're having the opportunity to manage development and not be coerced into somebody else's management. There are ways that, if they had provided everything we want, in other words, one thing in particular, if they had provided a phasing plan, which helps us to see what their proposal is. And we understand that market-driven things are going to change.
Right.
But staff has the opportunity to change those. But, if we're responsible for managing the development, then we need more information. The other thing I would say, Sherry, is when we're looking at changing the ordinance, I think we had in there sometime changing the third ordinance. We need to change that whole section. If that's not what we mean, we need to change section 3.
Just change it real quick while I have y'all here before everybody leaves too. For a work session, is there anything you would like for us to provide y'all that you don't have in your packet that would help? Is there, do you want larger
Oh, that might be nice. Yes, yeah. Some of these things larger, you know, like you said, they were,
I just.
no,
I
just,
hope in our next work
their
session, when we're
plans.
Going over all this, we can move to it quickly.
right.
If you think of anything else, just email us and we'll get it together for you.
I just wanted to thank everybody too. It's like a long meeting, but like I said, we knew it was gonna be, I know it was gonna be this heated, but. And I thank you, Mr. Wagner. It's like I do understand about all those questions. They are very good questions, that they will be answered before we finally vote on everything, so. Thanks, everybody, for getting me to be chair this year, and sorry, Bonnie's sick, and thanks for staff. Like I said, those minutes, they're much better, way better. Oh, gosh.
Barbara
yeah.
can take credit for that.
Okay, that's what we need. So thank you so much. And guess if we don't have anything else, I'm gonna follow the rules. Like think there should be, I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn because I think that's what we're really supposed to do anyway. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion
Do
to
we have a
adjourn.
second? We have a motion made, properly seconded. Can we get a vote?
Mr. Wagner,
Ms. Wagner.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Cullen,
Yes.
Mr. Sluter.
Aye.
Chairman Graywood.
Meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.